Are you sad about your parents' favoritism? At the same dining table, father would care about the chronically ill younger sister, asking if she was feeling better. Mother would remind the sister to take her medicine, her voice full of deep concern. Brother would prepare exquisite gifts for the obedient sister who takes her medicine, and the mischievous younger brother. The family was filled with laughter, everyone's face beaming with happy smiles. Except for Karina. She was her parents' daughter, brother's sister, and siblings' elder sister. She was also someone terminally ill, with only 1 year left to live. But her family under the same roof didn't know, and of course, never cared about her. Like an outsider, she didn't fit in with them, although they were all at the same dining table. But between her and her family, there seemed to be an invisible wall. This wall was called favoritism and neglect, cruelly separating her from her family. Looking at her laughing family, Karina quietly put down her utensils. She stood up, claiming she wasn't feeling well, and directly left this place that made her feel uncomfortable. Even until she closed the dining room door, none of her family members asked about her. That's when she understood they truly didn't care at all. Although hurt and sad, she still quietly comforted herself that it was okay. She was already used to it anyway. But suddenly she staggered and collapsed on the ground. Supporting herself on the ground, she couldn't stop vomiting. Her condition had worsened again. Just a few days ago, the doctor told her organs were gradually failing. She had a rare disease with at most 1 year left to live. The doctor told her to cherish her time, to spend this last year well with her family. But Karina showed a tragic smile. Because since childhood, no one would care about anything she said. No matter what happened to her, she was always the one abandoned by her parents. Therefore, she didn't tell her family about her condition and planned to quietly leave this place that hurt her. She only had 1 year left to live, but her family didn't care because they never cared about this sensible second child. She had always been an outsider abandoned by her parents since childhood. Throughout her life, whenever there was a conflict between her matters and her siblings, she would always be the one to give in. When her immature brother wanted to take away her only birthday present, and Karina objected, mother would loudly scold Karina that her brother was still young. Immature, saying, "Can't you, as a sister, just give in to your brother?" When her brother's class reunion conflicted with her birthday party, she would again be asked by father to postpone her birthday party. Because she was the sister, always at home, she should give way to her brother who was rarely home. But when her younger sister's matters conflicted with hers, she had to give in to her fragile sister. Because she was healthy, she should give way to her sick sister. Ivana had rebelled against this. When she had a cold and fever, she would seek out her mother, acting spoiled, wanting mother to take her to her room, to gain mother's love. But when the servants reported her sister was also unwell, she would again be the one mother abandoned. "Karina, you're the elder sister. Can't you stay in your room by yourself? Besides, you only have a fever. It's nothing serious, right? Your sister is chronically ill. As the elder sister, you should be more accommodating." So, after being abandoned by her parents time and time again, she understood that their tenderness never belonged to her. She began to gradually close off her heart. By the time she was 10, she no longer yearned for anyone to come. Therefore, when she learned she only had 1 year left to live, she chose to keep it secret and wanted to be like the white doves outside the window. In this final time, to leave this heartbreaking place. She didn't want to pretend to be happy when sad, didn't want people to think she was sensible anymore, and didn't want to keep giving in. She wanted to do some things she wanted to do in this final time. But now she didn't know where she should go. She thought confusedly, if only there was someone who truly cared about her. Whether they liked or disliked her didn't matter. Suddenly she remembered someone, that person at the engagement ceremony, who arrogantly called her a marionette. As an elder sister, she had to give in to her fragile siblings. And as a younger sister, she had to give in to her brother who was far away. The scales of love always tipped to the other side. She never had the right to speak up. All her concessions were taken for granted in her family's eyes. Gradually, in this long-term favoritism, Karina gradually closed off her heart. She no longer yearned for anyone's love. So, when she learned she only had 1 year left to live, she chose Lu Heng, whom she had only met once at the engagement party, rather than her family who had lived under the same roof all these years. Because her fiancé was the only one who had noticed her feelings at the engagement party back then. Her fiancé saw the reluctance and displeasure on her face. He immediately teased her, saying, "You're like a marionette," If you don't want to get engaged, just leave. Though I don't want to either. But just this mocking statement made Karina feel a connection she had never had before. Because this was the first time someone had cared about her feelings. Even if there was some malice in it, this made her drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Moreover, this was from a stranger she had just met. You should know that even her own parents had never asked for her opinion before arranging her lifelong marriage. Later, because her sister wasn't feeling well, they didn't even attend the engagement party. So Karina decided to act immediately and went to find her fiancé. She needed to exchange her gold coins for silver and prepare some simple change of clothes, some food and water. Oh right, she also needed to bring tools to dissolve the engagement. After all, this would give her negotiating power to stay there. Finally, before running away, she had to visit the doctor to get some medicine to stabilize her condition. Thinking about this, Karina felt a bit dejected, although she no longer yearned for her family's love. From skipping breakfast this morning until now, no one had come looking for her. Sometimes she wondered what their reaction would be if she told her family about her condition. They might treat her as a burden and quietly deal with it. She shook her head, reminding herself that none of it mattered to her anymore. She had 1 week left. She needed to prepare to leave this cold place. She only had 1 year left to live. She should have cherished the remaining time with her family. But she chose to run away instead. Chose to find her fiancé, whom she had only met once. For this, she specifically made a list of items for running away. But when she went out shopping, she met someone. He was the family doctor for everyone in this house, except her. Luton was also someone Karina had once deeply loved. But later Karina realized it was just her one-sided love. This will be mentioned later in the blog. The reason they met today was because it was her sister's weekly checkup. Because her sister had been sickly since childhood. Even the family doctor paid extra attention to her. In contrast, she, a seemingly healthy person with a terminal illness, could only be treated like a toy. Just as Karina wanted to leave quickly, her sister suddenly rushed down the stairs and fell into her arms. The huge impact caused her to twist her ankle. The doctor nearby quickly helped Karina step back to the shrine. But he wasn't worried about Karina. Instead, he was worried that Karina's sister Lil might get hurt because of her. But Sister Lil wasn't worried. She believed her sister would catch her. Seeing her sister's silence, Karina couldn't help but mumble softly. When Dr. Norton heard this, he realized that the well-behaved Miss Karina wasn't quite as people generally saw her. Feeling the doctor's strange gaze, Karina quickly reacted. She diverted attention by using the excuse of persuading her sister to cooperate with the medical examination. Sister Lil listened with disdain. She still wanted to go out to play with her sister, but Karina strictly refused, because if anything happened to her sister outside, her parents would blame her for it, just like before. Back then, Karina was drawing in her room. Her sister took a fruit knife from the table and played with it. When their mother discovered this, she immediately scolded the unknowing Karina harshly, accusing Karina of being thoughtless and not knowing how to take care of her sister. That's why she strictly refused this time. The rejected sister was very disappointed. She really envied how her sister could go out every day and their parents would look after her. But this very statement sounded ironic to Karina. How much she herself longed for parental love, and how much she had sacrificed for her sister. As a younger sister, she envied her sister's freedom, envied that her sister could move freely without parental restrictions, could freely enter and exit the Duke's mansion, while she had to have regular checkups and drink unpalatable medicine. But the sister didn't know that she was also the object of her elder sister's envy, envying how easily she could get their parents' attention. At the same time, the sister didn't know how much Karina had sacrificed for her. Sister Lil had been sickly since childhood. As the elder sister, Karina, to better care for her chronically ill sister, had given up all social activities. This resulted in her having no friends. She became the good sister to her siblings, the well-behaved good girl in her parents' eyes, and an ordinary lady in others' eyes. Especially at a family banquet, when guests at the Duke's mansion were introducing Karina, they spoke of how excellent the Duke's children were. First, they mentioned how outstanding her brother Arrow was. Then how lively and cheerful her younger brother Pelton was, always surrounded by many friends. And the youngest lady, Abel, who not only had gorgeous golden curls, but also jewel-like eyes. Then they mentioned Karina, but in their words, Karina was just an ordinary girl who always followed behind Abel. So when Sister Abel said she envied her sister, Karina just wanted to quickly leave this place. When her sister asked for meat skewers, Karina agreed to her sister's request. But after leaving the Duke's mansion, Karina kept blaming herself. How could she be jealous of her own sister? She was truly an unqualified elder sister. She was the well-behaved child in her parents' eyes. So whenever there was a conflict between her affairs and family matters, her parents would always use her maturity as a reason for her to give in. Your siblings are younger than you. You're so understanding. You should give in to your brother. Your sister's brother is rarely home. You're so sensible. You should give your time to your brother. She didn't understand. Just because she was well-behaved, did it mean it was okay for her to be wronged? It really proved the old saying, the obedient child gets no candy. Later, when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness with only 1 year left to live, when she subtly expressed her discomfort at the dinner table, not a single family member asked about her condition. Finally, she decided to stop wronging herself. She no longer wanted to be that well-behaved good child. She wanted to run away from home. She wanted to spend the last days of her life happily on her own terms. She went to the doctor who diagnosed her, telling him about her desire to protect and become a fiancée. But the doctor thought she was joking and stated that if she wanted to die, he wouldn't recommend prescribing quick-acting lethal drugs. He then waved his hand, urging her away, saying he wouldn't help someone seeking death. Karina knew the doctor had misunderstood her intention. She hurriedly explained to the doctor she just wanted to take a journey in her final time, not die away from home. She came to ask the doctor for medicine to suppress her condition. She also promised the doctor that during her travels, she would rest 2 days each week at hotels. After hearing Karina's words, the doctor fell silent. He didn't understand why Karina insisted on going to such a distant country. Knowing that the temperatures there were dozens of degrees below zero, her body certainly couldn't handle it. But seeing Karina's pleading eyes, he agreed to her request. Karina was overjoyed upon hearing this. She poured all her gold coins onto the doctor's desk. This was all she could do for this caring doctor. The good doctor fell into thought as he watched Ivana's radiant smile. Someone so young, yet able to give up life so easily. And her illness was called the art disease. People who got this disease all had a mysterious power. In other families, such children would definitely be nurtured by their parents to become admired by the world. Why didn't Karina know about her condition, leading to overuse, resulting in only 1 year left to live, and still unwilling to cooperate with treatment? From this, one could imagine what kind of environment she lived in, to be able to face death so calmly. She didn't have her brother's knowledge. She wasn't as lively as her brother, nor as cute and pretty as her sister. In everyone's eyes, she was just an ordinary young lady. But the truth was quite the opposite. Karina had shown exceptional painting talent since childhood, and she could make miracles happen. She could bring the creatures she painted to life. Karina was very shocked. She rushed to share her paintings with her parents. But at that time, her parents were celebrating her brother Ero's graduation. Karina also sincerely praised her brother's achievements. Then she showed her paintings to her parents. But her mother just gave it a brief glance and walked away, discussing with her father about how to organize a celebration party for brother Ero, completely ignoring Karina's hurt expression. After that, Karina stopped sharing her artwork with her family. Painting became her spiritual solace. Whenever she felt unhappy, she would paint. The creatures in her paintings would be given brief life by her. And these creatures she brought to life shared her feelings, briefly healing her wounded heart. But Karina didn't know then that such frequent use of life-giving power would cause her own life force to deteriorate. By the time she discovered this, it was too late. She only had 1 year left to live. The doctor advised her to stop using her miraculous power to live a few days longer. If she wanted to live, she had to stop painting. But Karina refused. She couldn't give up painting because it was her only spiritual comfort in this world. On her way back, Karina smelled grilled meat skewers. She remembered promising her sister to bring her meat skewers before leaving. So she went to the meat skewer stand, carefully selected 2 skewers for her sister. But she never imagined that because of these 2 skewers, she would once again receive unfair scolding from her parents. She had only brought her sister the meat skewer she wanted, yet her father woke her up in the middle of the night, giving her a harsh scolding. "Karina, did you buy street food for Abelie? Don't you know Abelie can't eat random food from outside? Do you know she's gotten sick from the food? She's been vomiting and is now severely dehydrated. As an elder sister, how can you be so inconsiderate of your sister?" Her mother joined in. "Karina, your father is right. You're already grown up. How can you still be so careless?" Karina anxiously tried to explain, but was silenced by her father's angry shouts. Karina fell silent. She kept telling herself internally, "Hold it in. You must hold it in. They're just too concerned about Abelie. If I just say sorry, this will all be over soon. And after this happened, they can only blame me. But why do they only treat me this way? I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I endure this? How long must I endure? Must I endure until the day I die a year from now? Will they understand me after I'm dead?" Thinking of this, Karina's eyes suddenly became sharp. She didn't want to wrong herself anymore. She didn't want to keep giving in anymore. At this moment, she became incredibly assertive. She looked straight at her father. "So, after saying all this to me, what do you want me to do?" Her father was momentarily stunned by Karina's sudden burst of assertiveness. He couldn't believe that the usually timid Karina had suddenly become so strong-willed. This left him speechless for a moment. The parents had barged into their daughter's room at midnight, waking her from sleep, and immediately launched into a barrage of scolding, accusing Karina of being inconsiderate, making her sister sick from food. But facing this groundless accusation, Karina chose not to yield this time. She coldly stared at her father and slowly spoke. "The reason I bought street food for Abelie was because Abelie asked me to. That's why I bought it for her. Moreover, Dr. Norton, our family doctor, was present. And these precautions, father, you should have told Abelie directly. You should have told her that such food is bad for health and shouldn't be eaten. Instead of venting your anger on me after something happens, accusing me of not taking good care of my sister." Father was stunned by Karina's sudden assertiveness, but immediately felt a sense of shame throughout his body. His authority as the head of the family was being challenged. He frowned and scolded Karina. "Is this how an elder sister should speak? Setting aside the facts, are you really blameless? Now that Abelie is suffering from severe vomiting and dehydration, it's because you weren't caring enough about your sister." Karina found her father's illogical words very frustrating. What did he mean by setting aside the facts? If facts were ignored, what was the point of arguing? She countered her father assertively again. "I don't think I did anything wrong. No one told me Abelie couldn't eat these foods. I thought Abelie had recovered. That's why she asked me to do this. Besides, Dr. Norton didn't stop me at the time." Her mother and Brother Pelton were also shocked by Karina's words. Her mother directly said, "Karina, how can you speak to your father this way?" Facing her shocked mother and brother, Karina found it laughable. Was she not allowed to defend herself? Should she just silently endure like before and humbly apologize as if that was normal? Now facing her mother's moral high ground, Karina refused to back down. "Is what I said wrong? These are just suggestions I made for my sister's health. Moreover, from an etiquette standpoint, my behavior was completely proper. And I only bought the street food for my sister after tasting it myself and confirming it was fine. Regarding this incident, I'll be more careful in the future, but please also have Abelie be more mindful." Her father was now left speechless. He only said, "Make sure you're careful in the future," before turning to leave. Her mother and Brother Pelton also hurriedly wanted to check on Sister Abelie's condition. But before leaving, her father turned back to Karina and said, "You know your sister has been sickly since childhood. Though you might be unhappy hearing this, but since you're very healthy, try to be understanding. She was healthy, so she had to give in to her sickly sister. Because she was healthy, so she had to sacrifice herself and spend all her time taking care of her sister. Just because she was healthy, so whenever something happened to her sister, it was always the fault of her, the healthy older sister, for not taking good care of her sister. But was being healthy a crime? Why did her parents always emphasize this point to her? Weren't her brother Arrow and younger brother Pelton also healthy? Why was she always the one who had to sacrifice and suffer? But now she also had a terminal illness with only 1 year left to live. Yet why was she still the one getting hurt? Her sister felt sick and vomited after eating street food. So her parents woke her up in the middle of the night to scold her harshly. Even though she proved that her sister's food poisoning wasn't her fault, she was still asked by her father to understand her fragile sister. Because she, the sister with terminal illness and only 1 year to live, was much healthier compared to her chronically ill sister. So when her father wrongly accused her, Her mother also asked Karina to understand her father. Your father is only so agitated because Abeli fainted, but they never admitted their mistakes from beginning to end. Instead, after wrongly accusing Karina, they kept asking her to understand them and the family. But who would understand Karina? Karina called out to her parents who were about to leave. Is that all you have to say? Her father turned around uncomprehendingly. Do we have anything else to say? Hearing this, Karina gave a bitter smile. Oh, so you still remember where my room is? Father, mother, you haven't visited me for years. I thought you had forgotten about me. About tonight's incident, please tell Abeli I'm sorry. I'm very tired now. I'll rest first. And so this absurd drama ended. But until the end, Karina never received that overdue apology and concern. 3 days had passed since the scolding. For 3 days, she hadn't appeared at the dining table, and her parents hadn't come to see her. Only her sister, after recovering, and brother Pelton came to apologize. Her brother apologized for staying silent when their parents scolded Karina that night. Sister Abeli also apologized tearfully, saying she shouldn't have selfishly asked her sister to buy street food. But what use were apologies after the fact? Like a bridge that's been nailed, the marks would always remain. But Karina finally chose to go to the dining room to see her family one last time, because after this time of preparation, everything she needed for her solo journey was ready. Today was the day to leave this heartbreaking place. At the dining table, various meat dishes were placed in front of Karina. But as a terminal patient, she could only eat salad, because no one cared about what she liked to eat. Her father, sitting at the head of the table, spoke. Karina, your birthday is in 2 days, right? Your brother Arrow will be on vacation then. We can go for a picnic. Can we postpone your birthday celebration? Though it was phrased as a question, her father's tone was more like an announcement, because deep down, he believed his obedient and sensible daughter would surely agree. And as he expected, Karina agreed. Actually, if her father hadn't mentioned postponing her birthday, Karina would have forgotten when her birthday was. Although Karina agreed to postpone her birthday, she declined the family picnic, saying she had something to do. Because she was leaving today, she naturally had no time for picnics with them. But her father thought Karina was just being emotional about the postponed birthday and refusing family activities. So once again, he scolded Karina for not understanding her family and only caring about her own interests. Karina had become numb to this and quickly admitted her fault. Yes, I'm sorry. That's the kind of person I am. I apologize to everyone here. I hope you all have fun outside. I'll go back after I finish eating. After saying this, Karina left the dining room without looking back. But back in her room, she couldn't help feeling heartbroken. This might be her last birthday, but they had never valued her. Just like they knew she would agree, they didn't even apologize. Why did even the final memories have to be so terrible? Finally, Karina left only a letter and departed from this cold home. With only 1 year left to live, she finally left this cold home, left these biased parents, left the family that didn't care about her, and began her first and last solo journey of her life. First, she paid for a carriage to leave the main city. Then she got off midway and walked for a while. Finally, following carriages and merchant groups, after spending 2 months in total, she arrived at her fiancé's territory, Lord Zendota Million Fido's Duke's domain. During her journey, she experienced the vitality of spring, the sparkling summer waves, the rich autumn harvest. Everything was so beautiful, bringing her different surprises every moment. But compared to Karina's happiness, her fiancé, Duke Million Fidos, wasn't so pleased. When he received news of Karina's arrival, he was reviewing documents and immediately stood up to escape. He appeared very angry, walking while loudly expressing his dissatisfaction. She's really rude. Even if we're engaged, she can't just show up without prior notice. The butler behind him coughed lightly, carefully reminding the Duke to mind his words. But the Duke's mouth was like a Gatling gun, showing no signs of stopping. I not only need to store food for winter now, but also prepare for magical threats. Where do I find time to take care of a delicate, noble lady? The Duke became more animated as he spoke. The butler behind him kept coughing more intensely, as if about to cough up his lungs. The Duke, unable to bear it anymore, stopped walking, turning to look at the constantly coughing butler. Is something stuck in your throat? Do you think it's too late for me to break off the engagement? Of course not. Karina's voice came from behind him. Duke Million finally realized belatedly. Had she heard everything he just said? The butler behind him was quite helpless. Can't guide him, really can't guide him at all. She was asked to break off the engagement by her fiancé face-to-face, but she gladly agreed without any anger. In fact, she even took out an already prepared engagement dissolution letter, only hoping that they would allow her to stay for a while. And she didn't necessarily need to stay in the mansion. Any corner house would do. Duke Million listened to Karina's words with confusion. But when he saw Karina's worn-out, tattered clothes, he immediately understood. Is your Earl's family having some difficulties lately? This question left Karina bewildered. But when she noticed the Duke's eyes on her dirty clothes, she hurriedly explained that she deliberately dressed this way to avoid any mishaps during her journey. Hearing this, the Duke frustratedly covered his forehead. Couldn't you have contacted me beforehand? How could you travel such a long distance alone and risk yourself? Karina fell silent hearing these words that seemed scolding, but were full of concern. Was this the first time someone had worried about her safety? But she quickly composed herself, because this might be the first and last journey of her life. After all, her life was coming to an end soon. But Duke Million didn't think much of it. In his view, as a noble lady, she indeed wouldn't have another chance to experience such an adventurous journey. Looking at Karina's innocent expression, even the usually serious Duke couldn't help but feel a bit playful. He strode towards Karina. What would you do if I don't let you stay here? Hearing this, Karina immediately thought seriously. If you won't take me in, then I'll have to join a merchant group and do odd jobs to make a living. The Duke was once again defeated by this foolish, stubborn noble lady. He couldn't help but question life itself. This bold woman before him, was she really the same person as that weak and silent fiancé from the engagement party? He never expected her to be so reckless. Finally, the Duke agreed to Karina's request. Karina was overjoyed. She quickly pushed the engagement dissolution agreement into the Duke's hands and stated that if one day she suddenly disappeared, he should assume she had left this place. He could consider it as getting rid of a mortal burden, and please don't send anyone to look for her. However, the Duke didn't take Karina's strange words to heart. He just asked the butler to arrange a room after she finished speaking. And so, Karina settled down in the home of her fiancé, who disliked her. Their daughter had run away from home for 2 months, but her family hadn't noticed. It wasn't until a maid was cleaning that she found the letter Karina had left on the table. But when the maid gave the letter to Karina's parents, their first reaction wasn't concern, but blame. Her mother criticized Karina for leaving without saying goodbye. Her father was furious, saying doesn't she often leave without notice to handle matters? She really doesn't understand family at all, only acting on her own whims. He turned to ask the maid when she had last seen Karina, but the maid said she had only seen the young miss 2 months ago. He then turned to ask his younger son and daughter, but they all said they hadn't seen Sister Karen for 2 months. The brother suggested that maybe she was hurt because they went on a picnic on her birthday. I should have scheduled the picnic for another day. But the mother thought, putting aside the facts, she knew this would hurt me. How could she just leave with only a note? If she hated picnics so much, she could have just told us directly. She really doesn't understand family at all. By the way, some money is missing from home. The maid said only 2 gold coins were missing during this time. Hearing this, her father sneered. See? She won't get far. She'll be back soon enough. When she comes back, I'll definitely teach her a lesson. Then he ordered the servants to casually send a few people to check on Karina's whereabouts, saying she wouldn't get far without money. Her mother was still a bit worried. After all, 2 months had passed. Hopefully nothing bad had happened. What could happen to her? She always breaks our hearts like this. We might as well take this chance to let her understand how hard life is outside and make her realize how much she's been given in this family. But what they didn't know was that Karina, whom they accused of not understanding family, was now lying in bed shivering with a fever of 80 degrees. Suffering from a terminal illness, she chose to run away from home, choosing to stay away from her biased parents. She spent 2 months doing this, coming to the northern territory of her fiancé, Duke Million, and managed to stay as she wished. But her reason for staying wasn't love. Rather, it was to stay away from her family, wanting to die in a peaceful place. Moreover, she had a very childish thought in her heart. She wanted to see after her death whether her family would show expressions of regret and sorrow. While taking a bath, she thought again about Duke Million from earlier today. Although he kept scolding her for traveling alone recklessly, Karina could hear the deep concern in his scolding tone, and he agreed to let her stay. He was actually quite nice, but she only had 3 pills left. She remembered the doctor's instructions before leaving. When only 3 pills remain, stop taking them. 3 days after stopping, you'll develop a high fever. Like a riverbank breached by flood waters, your body will collapse instantly. But don't panic. This is your body's final resistance. If you really can't bear it, take 1 pill every 2 days. And now, looking at the timing, Karina should develop a high fever tonight. Sure enough, without exception, coughing sounds soon started. Though her fever had reached 80 degrees, Karina felt extremely cold. Despite wrapping herself in layer after layer of blankets, she was still shivering from cold. Feeling it was unbearably cold, she decided to get up first. While she could still move, she wanted to go to the kitchen for some hot towels and water. After all, being neglected since childhood, she had learned to take care of herself. But this mansion was truly too large. The dark, gloomy corridors scared her, who feared darkness, from going forward. Just as she was at a loss, a dark shadow suddenly appeared beside her. This terrified Karina, who swung the oil lamp in her hand at the shadow. But as a familiar voice reached her ears, Karina quickly calmed down. It turned out the person was her fiancé, Duke Milyen. Karina let out a relieved sigh. But then, like a child who had done something wrong, she carefully asked why he was here. Duke Milyen scratched his head, unsure how to answer. Should he say he came specifically to check on her because he was worried? But wouldn't that make him seem like an overly anxious person? Impossible, absolutely impossible. So he made an excuse about checking the room's temperature regulator. But the Duke didn't understand why Karina would be alone in the corridor late at night. Moreover, her breathing was rapid and her cheeks were flushed. Her voice was also noticeably trembling. Thinking about these signs, the Duke had an ominous feeling. He grabbed Karina's hand. Do you have a fever? Being sick isn't scary. What's scary is hiding one's illness. Clearly, Karina belonged to the latter category. When Duke Milyen asked if she had a fever, Karina instinctively chose to hide it. She didn't want to trouble others. But her poor attempt at deception might have worked with her family when she said she was fine, but for someone who truly cared about her, it was rather awkward. The Duke felt the high temperature from Karina's palm. He felt a subtle ache in his heart. He couldn't help but show concern. You should tell me immediately when you're not feeling well. Why did you endure it alone until now? Only a foolish bear would keep enduring it, Karina thought. He actually compared himself to a foolish bear. But before she could object, the Duke's tone became stern. Do you know? On the battlefield, the most troublesome deaths are those caused by concealing illnesses. If you don't want things to get worse, you should speak up earlier. So, do you understand your mistake now? Karina, who had long suffered unfair treatment, instinctively apologized upon hearing these words. I'm sorry, but she suddenly came to her senses. Why am I being ordered around by him in the middle of the night for no reason? Just as she raised her head to speak, the Duke's extended finger interrupted her. How many fingers do you see? In Karina's vision, 6 overlapping images swayed. Karina thought humans can't have 6 fingers, and usually you see double images. So she confidently answered 3 fingers. The Duke looked at his 2 fingers and began questioning his life. Seeing the Duke's silence, Karina thought she must have guessed correctly. She felt quite clever. But the next moment, the Duke lifted Karina in his arms. This room isn't suitable for a sick person. You should rest in my quarters instead. I know you don't like me, but I don't want you to think I'm a malicious person. Just sleep peacefully. In the Duke's arms, Karina couldn't help but drift off, only hazily requesting him not to call anyone. The Duke repeatedly assured her, don't worry, I'll take care of you personally. Their daughter had run away from home for 2 months due to heartbreak. Her parents weren't worried at all. Instead, they blamed her for being thoughtless and bringing shame to the Relpadel family. That day, the Count, who had confidently said their daughter wouldn't go far, received news from his subordinates that Karina had already left the Southern Territory. This made him feel utterly humiliated, and he angrily slammed the table. Karina Relpadel, how old is she now? Yet still so thoughtless. Though from his perspective, the bad mood was understandable, but putting facts aside, even if she was hurt, she shouldn't act this way. To make me sad by running away from home, she's truly despicable. Her mother showed a bit of concern. Won't she encounter dangers on the road? Should we send more people to bring her back? But this suggestion was rejected by the Count. What's the point of bringing her back? If she wants to escape this family, let her be. Running away was her own choice. Unless she bows her head and admits her mistake, she won't be allowed to enter this house. Running away over a birthday party, is that acceptable? Moreover, if this news spreads, won't our Relpadel family become a laughingstock? Then he brought up his younger daughter, Abel. How is Leal doing? Is she lonely? She usually likes to stick close to Karina. At the mention of lovely Abel, the mother's slight worry instantly vanished. She's much better than her thoughtless sister, though she keeps going to Karina's room. Despite being young, Abel is much more mature than her thoughtless sister. At the mention of Karina, the Count's anger rose again. She's truly too willful, running away from home over such a small matter. Have we ever mistreated her? Was her allowance not enough? Or did we not buy her what she wanted? It's because she's never suffered hardship. That's why she creates problems out of nothing. The mother agreed. Yes, we've never mistreated Karina. Karina, who had been isolated by her family since childhood. Now she finally had a safe harbor to rely on. Ironically, the one she could depend on wasn't her family who had been with her for years, but rather a fiancé she had only met a few times. Lillian, looking at Karina lying in bed with a high fever, felt heartache. What was she hiding? Even in such pain, why did she still prevent him from calling a doctor? After a while, the sleeping Karina struggled to open her eyes. Alone again, she thought as she just woke up. A familiar voice came from beside her. You're awake. This startled Karina. The man's voice came again. Your fever hasn't broken yet. Keep lying down. This left Karina somewhat bewildered. Your Grace, why are you here? That was a good question. However, our proud Duke would never admit that he stayed to care for her out of concern. Didn't I promise not to call a doctor? And it wouldn't be appropriate to have servants care for you now. So I plan to stay with you until dawn. Karina couldn't believe it. This was the first time someone was willing to stay with her while she was sick. But Karina, who had long suffered unfair treatment, couldn't help but ask that question. I'm sick. Don't you find me troublesome? The Duke, seeming to sense the worry in Karina's words, immediately gave her a reassuring answer. You're sick and need care, and you're my guest. How could I find that troublesome? Karina smiled. This was her first genuine smile since she could remember. Back at home, she was always the one selflessly giving, always taking care of her sick siblings. Yet no one ever cared when she was sick. But this feeling of being cared for was really nice. This woman's fever had reached 80 degrees. Yet she insisted on not taking medicine or seeing a doctor, simply because she enjoyed this feeling of being cared for. Because this was the first time since childhood that someone cared for her when she was sick. Previously, she always took care of her sick siblings. No one ever cared about her when she was ill. But this time, this fiancé she had only met a few times was willing to care for her until dawn. When her fiancé tried to get up to fetch his keys from his bag, she anxiously grabbed his hand. I can't take medicine now. The doctor warned me before leaving. This is the body's final resistance. We can't use medicine or the body will collapse faster. But the Duke, who had been single for 20 years and never even touched a cat, blushed deeply at this sudden intimate contact, even starting to stutter. And no, your fever is too high right now. But Karina still stubbornly refused to take medicine. The Duke could only helplessly sit down. He really had no way with this willful lady. Seeing the Duke's reaction, Karina couldn't help but cover her mouth and giggle. Although her body felt cold and heavy and her vision was dark, this feeling of being cared for and able to be willful was truly addictive. Moreover, the Duke assured Karina she could sleep more, saying he would stay right there until she woke up. Hearing these sincere words of concern and feeling the real touch on her palm, Karina, who had no sleepiness before, suddenly felt her eyelids grow heavy. This feeling was really comforting. Could she really have such care for herself? Looking at the sleeping Karina, the Duke quietly changed his original thoughts. He would wait until winter passed before sending a telegram to her family. She didn't seem happy, and it appeared she had no one to rely on at home. So he let her stay here for a few more months. Karina, who had a fever of 80 degrees, finally returned to normal. Since Karina fell ill, the Duke had become very attentive. He would come to Karina's room every day, place his hand on her forehead like a greeting, carefully checking her condition. He would tease her, and the shy Karina would always react like a startled rabbit. He would invite her to have lunch together and share with her his thrilling moments of hunting magical beasts. He also noticed that Karina liked to draw, because last time he saw her bag was full of drawing tools. This observation surprised Karina greatly. Her family, who had lived under the same roof for over a decade, didn't even know her interests. Yet this fiancé, who had only known her for a few days, understood her so well. This made Karina slightly dazed, and accidentally, she bumped into the Duke's arms as he suddenly turned around. Such intimate contact startled them both. The Duke mentioned that Karina could go to the roof at dawn or sunset to see different beautiful views. But then he went into full mother hen mode, giving a long list of precautions. The wind is cold here. You must wear more clothes before going up. Make sure to tell Wanna before going up. And you must come down every hour to warm up. If you don't want to become dried squid, you must remember my words. Facing the Duke's nagging, Karina felt no impatience, but rather happiness. It felt so good to be cared for. But why did he compare her to dried squid? Who would understand? This awkward man actually compared his fiancée to dried squid. Then the Duke mentioned their initial engagement ceremony. At that time, Karina was like a walking corpse, silently following the maid. The words forced and unwilling to marry were practically written on her face. The Duke said if she didn't want to get engaged, she should have told her parents clearly, as it concerned her lifetime happiness. But the Duke didn't know Karina's situation. The engagement was decided by their parents, and they never asked for Karina's opinion. Even on the engagement day, her parents didn't attend because her sister Lil wasn't feeling well. Karina repeatedly bowed and apologized to the Duke for this. But the Duke just shrugged helplessly and said, "What I mean is, if you don't like something, you can tell me directly in the future. Not being able to refuse others can be terrible. Sister is sick, so let's postpone your tea party. Brother wants to go picnicking, so let's postpone your birthday. Your brother is still so young, just give him your toys." Unable to refuse, she could only sacrifice herself to accommodate others. Gradually, she became someone who couldn't refuse others, a pushover. But one day, someone gently told her, if you don't like something, you should boldly say it. You can say no to him. Moreover, to cheer up the sick Karina, the Duke specially took her to dine in a glass-domed room. Just because Karina had mentioned before that she didn't like greasy food, the Duke instructed the maid to prepare light dishes. All were placed in front of Karina. It turns out that in front of someone who truly cares about you, there's no need to pretend. Someone who truly cares about you will remember every word you've said. But this made Karina feel somewhat guilty. She had thought her fiancé would be cold towards her. But the reality was quite the opposite. If she were to die here, it would surely cause him trouble. Yet she was addicted to this feeling of being cared for, making her reluctant to leave. It's like never having seen light before. One can endure the darkness. But when sunlight breaks through the snow, even the strongest person cannot bear the bone-chilling cold. She nervously apologized to the Duke for coming without notice and causing him inconvenience. Meanwhile, Karina wondered whether she should tell the Duke about her art sickness. Tell the Duke. But even if she told him the truth, her condition wouldn't improve. And what if he kicked her out because of it? After weighing the pros and cons, Karina chose to keep it hidden. The Duke also expressed his apologies to Karina. His anger wasn't because he disliked her arrival, but because he was worried about her safety. Just forget what I said that day. I hope you won't take it to heart. Karina smiled genuinely once again. And so, they spent a wonderful lunchtime together. This was the first time Karina had eaten so well. She remembered what the Duke had said before lunch. There was a different view on the roof. Should she go see it? Karina, prone to fevers, developed another one. A deafening sound echoed through the Duke's mansion. The Duke, with low pressure, looked this disobedient woman up and down. You really took my words as mere wind passing by your ears. Didn't we agree before? Why did you go to the roof wearing just a robe? You really are troublesome. Just a few hours ago, early rising Karina didn't want to bother others and forgot the mother hen's reminders from yesterday. She went to the roof alone, seeing the breathtaking view. As someone who loved painting, how could Karina pass up such a good opportunity? She immediately took out her painting materials and began to sketch. As the pen tip continued to move across the paper, Karina's body temperature kept rising, but she didn't want to stop. Just a little more, just a little more. Then her body uncontrollably fell backward. Fortunately, Duke Mylane, who had been worried about Karina, caught her in time. And so came the beginning of that day. The Duke angrily scolded Karina. If you want to freeze to death, just say so. I can help you fill the bathtub with ice. Facing the Duke's nagging, Karina just smiled foolishly, very much like a mother hen. And the originally angry Duke was struck by Karina's carefree smile. He unconsciously reached out his large hand. Why don't you turn into a human heater? That way I could save on fuel costs. Then the Duke noticed the unfinished painting in Karina's hand. May I see your painting? Of course, though my painting skills might not be very good compared to my middle school brother. and her brother Pell, who could learn skills at first glance, and her sister Ephraim, who could easily create complex and beautiful embroidery. Her own paintings weren't worth mentioning. After all, even her parents wouldn't spare them a glance. But the Duke became absorbed in looking at Karina's painting. I think you're sometimes too modest. That's not always a good thing. She clearly had the magical ability to bring paintings to life. Yet she couldn't help but worry. Compared to her family members, she felt she was the most useless one. But after seeing her paintings, the Duke kept expressing his amazement. Though I'm not highly skilled in this area and can't give professional criticism, this is the most beautiful painting I've seen in all these years. You paint very well. The Duke's sincere words of affirmation made Karina blush deeply, because since childhood, nothing she did had ever been acknowledged. In her parents' eyes, they only saw her brother, younger brother, and sister. This led her to constantly deny herself, believing she was just a useless ornamental lady. But now someone was acknowledging her abilities. Although the other person might just be trying to comfort her, this feeling was still sweet. The Duke seemed to see through her lack of confidence. He immediately stated seriously that once Karina finished this painting, he could find a globally recognized expert in this field to evaluate it. However, mentioning this person made the Duke frown involuntarily. That fellow just makes you want to punch him. At this moment, the doctor entered the room, interrupting their conversation. The Duke briefly explained to the doctor the reason for Karina's fever. Just as the doctor reached out, Karina suddenly jerked and covered herself completely with the blanket. This left the doctor with her hand midair, feeling awkward. She could only look to the Duke who had called her, seeking help. But the Duke was also confused. He didn't understand why the usually reasonable Karina would act this way. Didn't I say I don't like doctors? A small mumble came from under the blanket, but the Duke decided not to indulge her anymore. He directly picked her up, blanket and all, and walked towards the bed. The doctor on the side was shocked to her core. "My lord, how can you be so rough with the noble lady?" Karina was also stunned speechless, but the Duke didn't think there was anything wrong. "I'm already being very considerate." The doctor wiped her tears. These two were really giving her a headache. Finally, after careful communication with Karina, the doctor successfully checked Karina's pulse. As they say, beware not of a smiling doctor, but of one with furrowed brows. The moment she checked the pulse, the doctor's expression became grave. She carefully helped Karina lie down on the bed. "Unstable pulse, weak heartbeat, and livor mortis has appeared. It seems the young lady doesn't have long to live. She's not dead yet, but livor mortis has already appeared." Hearing the doctor's diagnosis, the Duke finally understood. This willful young lady who ran away from home was actually in such pain. But the Duke didn't understand. Why would someone whose life was ending choose to run away from home? What was she hiding? He thought back to their engagement day. On that day, only her brother and younger brother attended. His gaze towards them was very dejected. But when someone greeted him, he would wear a practiced smile on his face. Does he always blindly accommodate others like this? He checked his message tone, hoping that when the first snow falls, he would receive a reply from that detestable feral. Meanwhile, at the Southern Clinic, the doctor who had diagnosed Karina was too worried to let it go. He decided to go north to find Karina, because northern doctors don't understand the medical condition. He instructed his apprentice Norton to take good care of the clinic. He must treat every patient fairly. That medical condition patient became so serious because his family doctor didn't take it seriously. That's why his condition became so severe. Moreover, that young lady's parents seem to be very biased too. So you must treat every patient equally, or I won't let you off. After saying this, he hurriedly took a carriage heading north. At the same time in the Earl's mansion, they still hadn't received any news about Karina. Her brother was very anxious, hoping father would send soldiers to search. But the Earl still firmly refused. Once soldiers were sent to search, the Earl's family would lose face. He clicked his tongue in displeasure. How could she be so inconsiderate and not think about her family? Suddenly, the Earl noticed the family photos on the desk. There was Sister Eli Bell, individual portraits of the younger brother and older brother, but Karina's was missing. Was there never a portrait of Karina from the beginning? The biased father finally had an awakening of conscience. He looked at the portraits on the desk. There were individual portraits of everyone, but Karina's was the only one missing. For the first time ever, he got up and walked towards Karina's room from memory. In his mind, he recalled Karina's complaint to them that night. "Oh, so you still remember where my room is? You haven't come for several years. I thought you'd forgotten." At the time, he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. He just thought it was complaints from being woken up in the middle of the night. But thinking about it carefully now, it was true. They hadn't visited Karina's room for many years. So long that he couldn't even be sure where her room was at first. Finally, after touring half the Earl's mansion, he found Karina's room at the end of a pitch-dark corridor. Back then, Karina had mentioned she was afraid of the dark and didn't want to stay in this room. At the time, they thought she was being unreasonable and had severely scolded her for it. But now looking back, it seems normal for a child to be afraid. He looked at the sparse furniture in the room. This was indeed too little for an adult. But why didn't she say anything if she needed something? He pulled open the dressing table drawer and found Karina's old drawings. It was of a place they had visited 2 years ago. At that time, because Ibral's health had improved, they postponed Karina's birthday and went on a family picnic. But wasn't Karina with the family at that time? At this moment, Karina's mother also opened the room's door. She saw Karina's drawings. She mentioned that she hadn't seen Karina's drawings for a long time. When she was little, she would often show me her drawings, but later, perhaps due to shyness, she stopped showing them to me. I thought she had lost interest in drawing. I didn't expect she still drew so well. I wonder how she's doing out there now. She's really becoming more inconsiderate as she grows up. How could she make us worry like this? With her gone, Sister Lil has no one to take care of her. Bill misses his thoughtless sister very much. Upon hearing this, the Earl's slight guilt immediately vanished. He waved his hand dismissively. She'll come back on her own. The money she has won't be enough to support her life outside. When she runs out of money, she'll naturally come crawling back to us. How despicable a doctor who treats patients unequally can be. As the Earl family's doctor, he couldn't treat patients equally because the chronically ill Ibral looked like his deceased sister. So he paid extra attention to her. And because the Earl's family didn't value the well-behaved Karina, he also neglected her. Karina's monthly health checkups were never once carried out. This led to Karina's overuse of her miraculous power, finally developing the art disease with only 1 year left to live. But he knew none of this. That day, as usual, he was examining the chronically ill Ibral, comforting her as she was sad about her sister running away. Ibral kept telling him about how good her sister was to her. Whenever she felt lonely, her sister would stay by her side, never refusing even friends. Whether it was reading storybooks or sleeping with me, she would never refuse. Once, I was jealous that she could go outside, so I deliberately prevented her from seeing friends, but she didn't get angry. Really? She must be a very good sister then. But he held back his next words. Yet she chose to abandon you and run away. No matter how wrong she felt, for her sick sister's sake, she should at least send a letter home. Ibral defends her so much, but she's really quite selfish. Ibral was very happy hearing Norton praise her sister. She then took out her sister's drawings that she had discovered recently. Look, isn't my sister's drawing really good? I just found out how talented she is. Norton's eyes widened in shock. Is this really drawn? It's so vivid. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something. He stood up to leave. He remembered his teacher mentioning the name of that art disease patient before leaving. It seemed to be something like Lena. He had his suspicions then, but then thought it impossible. There were so many people named Lena in the capital. How could it be the Earl's Karina? She didn't have any miraculous abilities and was very healthy. But now it seemed things weren't so simple. He checked the city clinic's diagnostic records. Looking at the records, he finally confirmed that the art disease patient was Karina. But he decided not to tell the Earl about this, because telling would surely break Ibral's heart. Perhaps dying quietly outside would be better for her beloved Lil. He begged the Duke to forget everything that had happened during this time, as if he had never appeared. My only birthday gift was given to my younger siblings. They would always receive praise from our parents for even the smallest things. While no matter how hard I tried, I could never get any attention. So when I learned that my life was coming to an end, I didn't want to repeat this pain in my final moments. That's why I chose to run away. Do you think I'm being childish? Like a child who hasn't grown up? Childish? Have you ever ruined your brother's graduation ceremony just because you wanted to celebrate your birthday? Or thrown tantrums and stabbed your brother with needles just to get your wallet back? Or bullied your sister, who always received excessive praise? You've never done any of these things, so how can that be called childish? Real childishness is accidentally spilling water on father's documents, and then running away for a week out of fear of being scolded. That's what's childish. But you've always been yielding to them. How can that be called childish? But yielding to family is natural, isn't it? Why is it natural? You yield to them, but who yields to you? Yes, when did I start thinking that yielding to them was natural? The Duke saw Karina's pain. He let Karina rest her head on his chest, which was even larger than hers. Don't hold it in. Let it out and cry. This is my first time comforting someone. I've seen this in novels. Cry. It'll make you feel better. You don't have to bear this alone anymore. I'll share your burden. Tianxin's father finally learned that his daughter had the art disease. But his first reaction wasn't concern. Instead, he was in disbelief because in his view, the ordinary Karina couldn't possibly have such talent. Just now, Duke Carlos, entrusted by Duke Million, arrived at the Earl's mansion. His purpose was to investigate Karina's condition and inform the Earl of Karina's whereabouts. Upon arriving at the Earl's mansion, Duke Carlos asked to see Karina's previous artwork. Though the Earl found it strange, due to their status difference, he ordered his servants to bring the paintings that were about to be thrown away as trash. These are just casual drawings by our second child. They're poorly made and probably won't meet the artistic standards of the Carlos family. Duke Carlos was speechless. How could a father belittle his daughter like this? Moreover, before coming, he had already seen the paintings sent by Duke Million. They were nothing like the worthless works the Earl described. He bluntly retorted to this biased father on Karina's behalf. It seems you need to improve your art appreciation skills. Even a layman wouldn't tell such obvious lies. The Earl trembled with anger. Lord Carlos, you suddenly visit asking to see Karina's paintings, though I don't know the reason. Frankly, your behavior just now was quite rude. But Duke Carlos wasn't afraid of the Earl's sarcasm. In his view, treating priceless artwork as garbage was what was truly rude. From their conversation, he also learned that Karina's relationship with her family wasn't good. Among the art disease patients he had helped before, few had good family relationships. But Karina definitely had the biggest rift with her family. So big that her family didn't even know she had such powerful drawing skills. But Duke Carlos didn't know that Karina had tried to show her parents before. It's just that her parents' attention was always focused on her brother and younger siblings. Naturally, they took for granted ignoring her, their healthy and ordinary second daughter. It seems, Earl, that you don't know your daughter has the art disease. Upon hearing this, the Earl's face showed disbelief. How is that possible? Karina doesn't have such talent. Besides, she's always been healthy. If she were really sick, how could she run away from home? Duke Carlos laughed. So going to her fiancé's house is called running away? The Earl was shocked. Karina was in the north? How did he manage that? Duke Carlos was speechless. But you don't even know where your daughter is? Yet you say she's healthy. I see no reason to stay here any longer. I need to go check on this art disease patient and help with her treatment. Although the Earl was very displeased, he still stood up to see him off due to their status difference. Thank you for telling me about my daughter's news. I will surely come to thank you properly later. Duke Carlos was nearly infuriated by this biased father. Earl, your ears are quite remarkable. They only hear what you want to hear. You refuse to believe your daughter has the art disease, yet you readily believe she went north. If someone told me my child was sick, I would first be concerned about their health condition. No need for future thanks. I cannot bear to receive the Earl's gratitude. After saying this, Duke Carlos slammed the door shut. Looking at the partially vanished painting in his hand, he was absolutely certain this was the power of creating miracles, able to give brief life to painted creatures. It seems that young lady's condition is already quite serious. As a father, you're truly biased to the extreme. Your daughter is terminally ill and near death, yet you still think she's healthy. Learning your daughter has health issues, your first reaction isn't concern, but doubt. You'd rather believe she's in the far north than accept that your daughter has a terminal illness. No wonder you didn't even know Karina possessed such powerful talent. You truly are a dedicated father indeed. These words from Duke Carlos before his departure had been echoing in the Earl's mind these days, leaving him lost in thought. Because of Karina's departure, many matters in the Earl's mansion were left unattended. His wife had collapsed from overwork, and the Earl himself began having health issues, starting to take medication as well. But you should know, all these complicated matters were previously handled by Karina alone. Obviously, the Earl hadn't thought about this. At this time, her brother Arrow entered the room with family Dr. Norton. Norton reported to the Earl about Arabelle's condition and the Countess's recovery progress. But from beginning to end, there was no mention of Karina, who had the art disease. Even when leaving, he still held on to his thoughts. Perhaps letting Karina die quietly somewhere outside would be the best choice for Arabelle and the entire Earl's family. After Norton left, the Earl casually brought up Duke Million. Arrow, when you attended Karina's engagement party in my place, what kind of person did Duke Million seem to be? Brother Arrow gave an affirmative answer. Just like the rumors say, he's an impeccable person. He took good care of Karina then, and Karina seemed quite satisfied with him too. The Earl was very displeased hearing this. She ran away just because someone was a bit nice to her, not considering at all how busy the family would be. Now, because of her selfishness, your mother has collapsed from exhaustion, and not a single letter for such a long time, making her parents worry. This is truly unfilial. But I remember Karina wasn't like this before. When did she start becoming like this? Even now, the Earl still doesn't believe his daughter has the art disease and is dying. Mother fell ill from overwork. The biased father was taking antibiotics like food, just as the Earl's mansion fell into chaos. Our poor Karina, finally as her life was nearing its end, got to experience a life of being loved and cared for. Karina recently found a new joy. She would wake up during the early morning hours every day, taking her drawing tools to capture the Duke practicing sword in the moonlight. Meanwhile, she also prepared to fill out her death wish list, wanting to do some interesting and worthwhile things before leaving this world. But having always revolved around her family since childhood, she didn't know what to write for the moment. So she decided to ask the Duke what was worth seeing in the north. Just then, the Duke's sudden voice startled her. In the north, besides fierce magical beasts, there's nothing much worth seeing. What are you secretly doing here? I knocked 5 times, but you didn't hear. After speaking, he grabbed Karina's unfinished drawing and teasingly asked, "What's this? I was wondering why you wake up so late every day. So you've been secretly drawing me at dawn. I'm the Northern Lord, you know. If you want to draw me, you'll have to pay extra." This made Karina so embarrassed that she stumbled over her words, hurriedly explaining. "It's just that Million looks so cool practicing sword alone in the dim moonlight." This awkward moment lasted for over 20 seconds. It instantly broke through the defenses of someone who'd been single for 20 years since birth, never even seeing a female cockroach. He hurriedly changed the subject. "I'm going to inspect the territory today. Would you like to come along?" Soon after, the well-dressed Karina appeared before everyone. The Duke's face turned red again, like a monkey's bottom. He eagerly took Karina's hand and helped her into the carriage. In the carriage, the Duke stared at Karina without blinking. "Now this is how a noble lady should look. What are you holding? I noticed it earlier." Karina shyly explained to the Duke about the notebook's purpose. Hearing this, the Duke offered some advice. "You don't need to write grand things, nor think too deeply. You can write about things within your reach. Forgive my directness, but I think you always overthink things, caring too much about others' opinions, thus neglecting yourself. So, Karina, this world is vast. Don't trap yourself in that small Earl's mansion. You should learn to love yourself more. You're naturally a towering tree, but your family planted you in a tiny flower pot, so you had no choice but to take root in that small pot. But now this tree no longer needs to endure. It can break free from the flower pot. So this is not your fault. I hope in the days to come, with me by your side, you'll learn to love yourself more." The Earl's daughter, worth hundreds of billions, was stunned speechless by a common street scene. Because there were magical beasts being slaughtered on the street and decorations made from their skin and bones. These were all things she had never seen or heard of before. Seeing Karina's reaction, our Duke naturally awakened his wife-doting tyrant attributes. "Whatever you like, I can buy this entire street for you." But just as Duke Million said these words, urgent alarms sounded throughout the city. This was the alarm for the magical beast Lacey, for the safety of the city's residents. The two quickly arrived at the city wall. The Duke quickly gathered information about the Lacey beast from the city guards. Then he told Karina to stay put and hide. After speaking, under Karina's shocked gaze, he leaped down from the 10,000-meter-high city wall and engaged in battle with the attacking magical beast Haida. Soon, the Duke had inflicted many wounds, both large and small, on Haida's body. But because Haida was so large and its entire back was covered in tough skin, killing it wouldn't be easy. All Duke Million could do was drive it away. Karina watched the intense battle with great concern. She wanted to help the Duke who had been taking care of her, but going down would only cause trouble. Suddenly, she had an idea. She quickly searched through her travel bag and found her drawings of the Duke. Perhaps these could be useful and help him. Soon, under the Duke's strong resistance, the magical beast Haida lost patience. After letting out an unwilling roar of anger, it reluctantly turned and left. Seeing this, Karina anxiously ran towards the Duke. The Duke was counting casualties at this time. When he noticed Karina, she was already panting in front of him. Heartbroken, she took out her handkerchief and carefully wiped the blood from the Duke's forehead. The Duke saw the concern in Karina's eyes and hurried to comfort the frightened Karina. "This is all the magical beast's blood. Don't worry, I'm not hurt." After speaking, he took out a necklace and put it on Karina. The subordinates behind them were shocked, exclaiming it was impossible. The Duke was displeased and ordered those who had just shouted to run 300 laps around the city. The unscrupulous doctor who hoped patients would die outside was actually a good master at saving people. Because he couldn't stop worrying about his patient, he traveled thousands of miles to the north and found Karina, who was traveling with the Duke. Both the Duke and Karina were amazed. The north was so vast. How did the doctor find them so accurately? Facing their confusion, the doctor took out an embroidery. "I found you through the power of miracles. For example, I just need to think about finding someone in my heart, then burn the embroidery, and I can know where they are. When I was young, I even caught criminals using this ability." Hearing this, the Duke immediately grasped the key point. "Are you also an art disease patient? Has your art disease been cured?" The doctor shook his head helplessly. "My art disease hasn't been cured. Because I overused this power before, I can barely see now. The reason I can still see some things now is all because I gave up embroidery. This is the simplest and quickest solution." The Duke still wouldn't give up. "Is this really the only way?" "Yes, this is the only way. Actually, art disease isn't something that everyone gets. Even among miracle-creating artists, only 1% get this disease. But cases like mine where vision is lost aren't rare among art disease patients. The rarest is those who can create life at the cost of their own life." Hearing this, the Duke breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that as long as the artwork couldn't create life, it wouldn't be life-threatening. "Yes, that's why I came here. I wanted to confirm what type of art disease Miss Karina has exactly." Hearing this, Karina anxiously interrupted the doctor. "Let's talk about this in the room." Because of family favoritism and lack of understanding, therefore, from a young age, he began practicing talking to himself. He learned to be composed and persistent. He was never the protagonist in his own life, always playing supporting roles for others. As a sister, he had to quietly support his brother, who was the heir. And as an older sister, he always had to be ready to sacrifice for his younger siblings. His life couldn't afford any rebellion. He had tried to rebel once, when he was sad and asked to sleep with his mother. He was rejected because she had to comfort his brother. This time he chose to rebel. He shouted, "Why is it always brother? If only there was no brother." But what he got in response was his mother's harsh slap and disappointed criticism. "How can you be so inconsiderate? How can you act so unreasonably as an older sister? You shouldn't be jealous of your brother. You should be grateful he was born healthy and treat him better. If only your sister could be half as healthy as you, that would be good." After that, whenever he felt unwell, they would think he was faking illness. They said he was making trouble and threw him into the slums. But he just wanted to be cared for by family, to be loved by family for life. He never thought this fragile child had endured such great pain. He empathetically grabbed Karina's hand, gently comforting the crying Karina. "It must have been very painful staying around these people who hurt you. Let me tell you my story too, though it's nothing compared to the injustice you've faced. But I hope you can find faith to live on from it. When I was young, I loved embroidery, but people around me didn't understand, saying why would a man do embroidery? My parents also wanted me to become a knight and earn a title, but I didn't want that, so I became more devoted to embroidery. Later one day, I lost something very precious, so I embroidered that item and burned it like a funeral ritual. Then a miracle happened. The burned embroidery guided me to find that lost item. After that, I used this ability to help police catch criminals like a hero. I also helped others find lost pets and children. The feeling of going from being ignored and mocked to suddenly becoming someone others praised and envied, I really enjoyed it at the time. Until one day, my eyesight began to decline. I could no longer embroider to my satisfaction. The doctor said I had art disease, and if this continued, I would become permanently blind. I was truly desperate at that time. I wanted to die. In the end, like you, I embarked on a journey. But during my travels, I found a new dream. So I gave up embroidery and became a doctor. I don't want art disease to be called incurable, so I can't give up easily either. So Karina, don't give up so easily. There are still many worthwhile things in this world waiting for you. So tell me more. Why did you wait until your condition became so severe before seeking medical help? Didn't your family doctor Norton notice? As a family doctor, he couldn't treat everyone in the family equally. When he learned that Karina had art disease and was going to die, he chose to hide it. He even hoped Karina would die quietly somewhere else. But what he didn't know was Karina once had special feelings for him. Karina was only 18 at the time. In the courtyard, she met Norton, the family doctor who came to the mansion for the first time. Norton took the initiative to greet Karina. Being their first meeting, he smiled shyly. His words made Karina, who had never been valued, feel particularly close. Karina began unconsciously paying attention to his whereabouts, and Norton would always respond with a big smile. This made Karina, who had been neglected since childhood, feel others' warmth for the first time. That day she met Norton again. She eagerly went forward, wanted to talk to Norton. Though she had countless words in her heart, what came out of her mouth was just a casual greeting. "Norton, what are you doing here?" Norton shyly said he wanted to pick a flower for someone, saying they would surely like it. Hearing this, Karina's heart began racing wildly. She had prepared herself to accept Norton's gesture. But with her sister Elabel's appearance, her expectations instantly vanished. It turned out her so-called love was just her own imagination from beginning to end. Though somewhat disappointed, Karina, who was used to loneliness since childhood, recovered quickly. That day, as usual, Karina took her sister, who wasn't allowed to go out, to select books in the library. Her sister kept complaining to her, complaining about Norton, about how he wouldn't let her do this or that. But listening to her sister's complaints, Karina felt heartbroken. Her sister's annoyed grumbling was exactly what Karina longed for, but could never have. While lost in thought, her sister suddenly appeared from behind the bookshelf. The wooden bookshelf instantly lost balance and fell towards Karina. Norton, hearing this from outside, rushed in anxiously calling Elabel's name. He saw Karina injured on the ground under the bookshelf and Eli Bell crying nearby for her mistake. His first choice was to comfort the frightened Eli Bell. As a doctor, he completely ignored Karina, who was trapped under the shelf. Instead, he turned to Karina and shouted angrily, "What were you doing? Eli Bell is not like you. She's very weak. Fortunately, the shelf fell on your side today. What if it had fallen on Lil? Is this how you take care of your sister as an older sister? I think you want her dead." After saying this, he left the library carrying the crying Eli Bell, completely ignoring Karina, whose leg was broken by the bookshelf. At that time, Karina still foolishly believed that he was just too concerned about Eli Bell and acted that way in the heat of the moment. But Norton never came back, even after night fell. Since then, Karina realized that Norton was just like her parents. They focused all their attention on Eli Bell. So even if I went to him for a diagnosis, he wouldn't tell me my true condition because he was worried about Eli Bell. Because he feared that if Eli Bell knew about this news, it would negatively affect her treatment. After hearing this, the doctor was very angry. He had always advised him to treat every patient equally, but this guy hadn't listened at all. However, the doctor wasn't the only one who was angry. The Duke, who was eavesdropping outside, was also furious. This woman didn't care about her own life. She knew that painting would consume her limited lifespan. But to help the Duke find the weakness of the Monster Herda, she still risked her life to draw the image of Monster Herda on paper. Now they just needed to color it, and the monster on paper would come alive. But halfway through coloring, he embarrassingly realized that he didn't have enough paint. He also felt a bit guilty, because the creatures he created through painting could communicate with his heart. They had always been there for him when he felt helpless and wronged. And now, it felt like he was using his own created children. But he genuinely wanted to help those who cared for him. While hesitating, he glimpsed a shining necklace nearby. This was given to him by the Duke during their trip a few days ago. The Duke said it was a northern legend. It was called Heron, a very rare item that dropped from hunted monsters. Legend said that physically weak people would become healthy if they wore it. Holding Heron, Karina felt her breathing become much smoother. She closed her eyes and made up her mind. Since she was going to die anyway, she might as well repay the Duke who had taken care of her before dying. Meanwhile, the Duke, practicing sword under moonlight, found it strange not feeling Karina's gaze. When she learned Karina lacked paint, she immediately arranged the most comfortable carriage. She cleverly wore matching couple outfits with Karina. Karina felt awkward with the Duke's grand gestures. Although she had been in the north for some time, she was still somewhat uncomfortable with the Duke's care for her. However, thinking about getting a new painting scroll and this addictive attention, she couldn't help but feel happy. Ever since the Duke overheard about Karina's past experiences, her care for Karina became even more attentive. Hearing Karina was out of paint, she immediately arranged the most luxurious carriage to go shopping. During the journey, she kept reminding Karina if she felt any discomfort, she must speak up. Don't hide it for fear of being troublesome. At the same time, the Duke also told her about sending Karina's paintings to the Carlos family earlier. The Carlos family was the empire's recognized authority in art appreciation, and they were also very knowledgeable about art disease. Their patriarch Carlos is my good friend and should be on his way to the north now. This might help with treating your art disease. But Karina was startled upon hearing this, due to being ignored and denied since childhood. Even though her previous paintings had received the Duke's approval, the inferiority developed since childhood couldn't be overcome by just one approval. The Duke noticed Karina's inner worries, so she gently comforted Karina. You are excellent, and your paintings are wonderful. Since you chose to escape from that suffocating family, now you should live for yourself. Don't let them affect you anymore. Besides, you're not alone anymore. Just as the Duke was about to make an emotional confession, the clothing store manager, who came to greet them, accidentally interrupted. The Duke was very displeased about this, but for Karina's sake, she couldn't show her anger. She could only reluctantly explain to Karina, this is the best clothing store manager in the north. Before we go buy art supplies, let's first order some clothes suitable for wearing in the north, and some work clothes for your painting. Karina anxiously wanted to refuse when she heard this, but the Duke wouldn't give her the chance. The Duke waved her hand grandly. Bring out all the expensive clothes from your store. This frightened Karina, who quickly pulled on the Duke's arm to stop her. Just buying a few pieces is enough. Don't spend so much. But the Duke looked at Karina, holding her hand tightly, lost in thought. Mother once said, when a woman says no, it means yes. Karina is just being shy. So she gave Karina a reassuring look. I understand. Pick whatever you want. As long as you're good, I'll buy it for you. Karina was dumbfounded. Are you sure you really understand? She only used 3 sentences and made the man buy an entire clothing store for her. Helpless, Karina could only resign herself to cooperating with the tools, playing a real-life version of Miracle Nikki. After a while, Karina finally had a chance to collapse onto the sofa, while the store owner was grinning from ear to ear, continuing to promote to Karina. We also have some exotic-style clothing here. Would you like to take a look? Karina quickly refused, not wanting to go through that ordeal again. But the Duke thought Karina wasn't feeling well, so she placed her hand on Karina's forehead. And the exhausted Karina, feeling the sudden coolness, found it very comfortable and unconsciously nuzzled against it, but immediately widened her eyes, shyly explaining, I didn't mean to. It's just that your hand was cool, so I... But the Duke wasn't concerned about that. She very anxiously asked Karina if she had a fever. Why are you so hot? Should we go back first? Karina was confused by this question. Anyone would feel hot if you suddenly put your hand on a girl's head. But Karina was too embarrassed to say it out loud. After all, she had just nuzzled against the other's hand, so she could only make excuses about there being too many clothes and not knowing how to choose. The Duke heard this and understood again. After leaving the clothing store, Karina was upset, while the Duke carefully comforted her. I'm happy to buy everything for you. Why are you upset? Karina just felt she didn't need that much effort. There was no need to buy everything. And it was also her first time hearing someone say they wanted to buy everything for her. The Duke said these were small matters. Just consider this as an apology gift for sending your paintings to Duke Carlos without your permission. Karina could only sigh helplessly. But I can't possibly wear all these clothes. The Duke replied, we have plenty of time. You can wear them slowly. Next, we should go buy the art supplies you need. Having a fiancé who is a lord What kind of experience is it? Too many clothes? Don't know how to choose? Simple, just pack everything and take it home. What? You say there are too many clothes to wear? Then change every day, morning and evening. Change whenever you're free. Karina's face turned red from this domineering behavior. She never thought that the attention and care she didn't receive from her family. Now, she would experience it from a fiancé she had only known for a few months. Receiving everything. Just thinking about Million's kindness, Karina couldn't help but feel her heart flutter. She carefully took Million's large hand, interrupting Million, who was trying to go home to play Miracle Nikki. Let's go, we need to buy art supplies. As soon as they arrived at the art store, Karina excitedly widened her eyes, staring unblinkingly at the art supplies inside. Meanwhile, the Duke was still reminiscing about the lingering warmth from earlier. The art store owner, seeing their elegant attire, looked at them with disdain, assuming they were just nobles out for a novelty experience. So when Karina said she wanted to buy some art supplies, he impatiently rushed them, stating that he didn't have any high-end supplies suitable for nobles. This enraged the wife-doting Million, who was about to lose her temper. Karina hurriedly walked. Suddenly, the store owner noticed Karina's hands. He suddenly jumped in front of Karina, saying he wanted to look at her hands. The Duke was even more displeased now. It was one thing to insult herself, but now he dared to flirt with her future wife. Did he think she wouldn't get angry? But Karina graciously extended her hand. The art store owner, upon seeing the calluses on Karina's hands, apologized to Karina. So you're also passionate about art. I thought you were just a rich young lady treating art as a hobby. To express my apologies, please feel free to look around. I'll give you everything for $9.99 with free shipping. Hearing this, Karina couldn't contain her excitement and went to look around, leaving the resentful Duke standing there. After calming down, the Duke proudly discussed some ordering matters with the store owner, negotiating about some orders, because she wanted to create a dedicated art studio for Karina. The Duke also curiously asked if the store owner was also skilled in art. How else could he tell Karina loved art just by looking at her calluses? The store owner frankly admitted, "Yes, I also love art very much. But later I got artist disease, and both my hands started becoming stiff. But after I moved to the north, my condition started improving gradually. So I settled in the north and opened an art store." The Duke, hearing this, was about to ask about his recovery, but was interrupted by Karina suddenly coughing up blood, sweating profusely. Wait, something's not right. This woman just casually drew a picture, but the next second, a jailer larger than her emerged from the painting. This terrified the woman. She hadn't expected the creature she casually created to be so enormous. The next moment, everyone in the Duke's mansion felt a strong tremor. The Duke, worried about Karina, immediately went to her room to check. But when the Duke saw the monster Herta in front of Karina, she carefully called out for Karina to step aside while preparing for battle. But seeing this, Karina anxiously threw herself into the Duke's arms to stop her. "This child is my creation. He hasn't hurt me." The Duke then noticed Karina's eyes had turned golden. "Karina, did you use the power of miracles?" Hearing this, Karina quickly covered her eyes. "Sorry, you must hate this color." "No, I think it suits you. But I know that your artist disease worsens every time you use miracles. Don't you remember? So for your own good, let's get rid of it quickly." But Karina hugged Monster Herta, refusing to move. "No, he's my created child. He'll disappear on his own soon. You can't hurt him." Seeing this, the Duke sighed helplessly. "Then let's put him outside." So the Duke tried to communicate with Monster Herta. "Herta, can you go out this way?" Unexpectedly, Monster Herta nodded in a surprisingly human-like way. But its enormous body clearly couldn't move freely in this small room. Everywhere it passed was left in chaos. Seeing this, Karina was sweating profusely and quickly apologized to the Duke. She promised she would work at the electronics factory assembling screws to earn money for compensation. But the Duke didn't care. She gently stroked Karina's forehead. "These things are nothing compared to your health. Let's go outside and settle the monster first." Once in the courtyard, Herta wasn't as tyrannical as imagined. Instead, it was rather silly, frightening the birds resting in the trees. Seeing this, the Duke couldn't help but ask Karina curiously, "Aren't you afraid of it? Look at my battle-hardened knights behind me. They're all so nervous. But you seem very calm." Karina smiled gently. Because it's the child I created. I can communicate with it mentally. Also, it's the child that understands my heart the most in this world. But the Duke still had questions. With so many monsters, why did you specifically choose Herta? Hearing this, Karina's face quickly turned red. Because I wanted to help you find Monster Herta's weakness. But the Duke felt troubled. I never wanted you to help me. Your health is already so poor. You don't need to sacrifice yourself for others. No, I'm not helping others. I'm helping you. I don't want you to get hurt while fighting monsters. After speaking, Karina nervously gripped her dress. Million, can you promise me something? If what I did helps you, when we part, could you give me a tight embrace? At the end of my life, if I could take your warmth with me, then I could leave this world with a smile, without regrets. But Duke Million remained silent upon hearing this, because she had already fallen deeply in love with this pitiful person before her. So all along, she had been unwilling to face the fact that Karina would soon die. After a long silence, she finally agreed to Karina's request. But she also had her own condition. She asked Karina not to act on her own like this anymore, because she didn't need this kind of help. But these words made Karina's heart ache. She lowered her head and said, "If you hate it, I won't do it." The Duke immediately knew Karina had misunderstood. She anxiously wanted to explain, but was interrupted by the sudden appearance of the butler. "Your Grace, Lord Carlos has arrived." The meeting of good friends was always so plain and simple. Duke Carlos, who had come from afar, politely extended his hand to Karina. However, his extended hand was intercepted halfway by Duke Million. "You want to take this chance to touch my wife's delicate hand? No way." And Carlos's grabbed hand also started to grip tightly. "You want me to just take this loss? No way." And so, a contest between men quietly began. Finally, Karina stepped in to break the stalemate. "Let's sit down and talk." Hearing this, they both disgustedly wiped their hands, but then immediately got to the point. When hearing that the monster Karina created still hadn't disappeared, Duke Carlos was very surprised. Karina's abilities seemed to be beyond his imagination, and Duke Million, who had been worried about Karina, couldn't help but ask the question that had puzzled her for long. What exactly did Karina's miracle creation mean specifically? Carlos patiently explained to his good friend. The miracle Karina created was the rarest among all miracles. It was also the most powerful kind. For instance, any creature, whether it exists in this world or not, as long as Karina could understand it, she could create it exactly as it should be. She could even create humans. Both Karina and Million were shocked to hear this. Her ability was actually this powerful, but they didn't notice Duke Carlos's hesitant expression beside them. Actually, there was some more important information he hadn't revealed. Because heaven is fair. When you want to obtain or possess something, you must pay an equal price. So people with this power rarely live beyond 30 years. But he didn't plan to say this now, so he changed the subject. "Karina, I have something to give you. It's a letter from your father, Count Leopold." The biased father finally showed concern. "Come back quickly. Stop embarrassing the family out there." After reading the letter, Karina mocked herself. What was she expecting? Compared to her safety, her father indeed cared more about the family's reputation. "You always say if there's any dissatisfaction, just speak up. But when I speak, which one of you has ever listened seriously? You only see my sickly sister alive. But now, is that child's condition worse than mine, a dying person?" Completely disappointed, Karina stood up dejectedly. She walked straight to the fireplace nearby. "Until the very end, you still refuse to believe I'm sick. I suppose if I'm sick, it would be troublesome for them. So the bond between father and daughter has completely broken after reading these words." After burning the letter, Karina turned back to comfort her shocked friends. But just as she opened her mouth, her heart felt a sharp pain. Something had happened to Monster Herta. The daughter suffered from an incurable disease. Monster Herta subsequently grew more intense, leading to the current situation. Upon hearing this, Duke Million's face turned ashen. He had almost caused harm to Karina. He apologized to Karina guiltily. But Karina wasn't angry at the Duke at all. Instead, she comforted him, saying she had a solution. Hearing this, Million felt mixed emotions. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Duke Carlos, who had been watching their romance from the side. "Excuse me, you two. Seems you've forgotten there's a professional right here." After getting their attention, Duke Carlos put away his playful smile. He seriously told Duke Million that creature was created by Karina, so only she can calm it down. "Don't worry, it won't harm Karina." Seeing his good friend so certain, the Duke stopped objecting. He quickly ordered everyone to stay away from Monster Herda, creating a quiet environment for Karina. After giving these orders, the Duke still lowered his head worriedly. He whispered something in Karina's ear. Then, after reminding his subordinates to maintain silence, he turned and left. Karina then approached her self-created big child with anxiety and nervousness. She carefully approached the big child she had created with her own hands. Karina slowly extended her hand, softly comforting. "It's all right, child. Don't be afraid." The originally frenzied Monster Herda actually calmed down as Karina approached. At this moment, Karina's mind wandered back to what Duke Million had whispered in her ear earlier. "Karina is with me. You don't need to restrain yourself. Do whatever you want, because no matter what happens, I will be by your side to protect you." Karina, who loved painting, finally had her own exclusive studio. This was carefully prepared for her by Duke Million. It's worth noting that Karina never had a proper painting space in her own home. Her room was always particularly dark, both day and night. But now, in the home of her fiancé of just over 3 months, she had a luxurious and bright private studio. Karina was very fond of this unique gift, because it was more precious than any gift she had received since childhood. But while happy, her heart also felt some pain. But she wasn't feeling sorry for herself. She felt sorry for the Duke. She knew her life was coming to an end. She wouldn't be able to accompany the Duke in the days ahead. So Karina couldn't face the Duke's feelings. She could only carefully avoid this precious gift. The Duke noticed Karina's awkwardness, so he presented it as a thank you gift for helping find Monster Herda's weakness, giving the studio as a token of gratitude. But Karina still felt unworthy. After all, the Monster Herda she created had hurt many people and destroyed many families. The Duke was helpless facing such a conscientious Karina. He could only awkwardly turn his head aside and remain silent. Karina giggled. Seeing the Duke's reaction, she stopped teasing him. She turned around and sincerely expressed her gratitude to the Duke. "I really like this gift. Now I don't have to worry about running out of paint anymore. And I have a spacious, bright space where I can create anytime. It's just a pity I can only stay here for half a year. Not just that, if you're willing, you can stay here forever. And even after you return to the Count's mansion, you can still come here often to paint." But the more the Duke said such things, the more Karina's heart ached. She painfully fidgeted with her fingers. She wanted to tell the Duke the truth, but she didn't want the Duke's future days to be filled with pain. In the end, she chose to force a smile, turn around, and thank the Duke for his kindness. Perhaps quietly leaving would be the best choice for the Duke and everyone else. After leaving Karina's room, the Duke, unaware of everything, sighed about why time passed so quickly. He also felt some regret about why initially he had only agreed to 1 year with her. Why wasn't he more greedy back then? Weber smiled. The Duke's face showed no restraint. To help Karina recover her health sooner, when facing his friend Duke Carlos's teasing, he no longer retorted mercilessly as usual. Instead, seriously, he begged him to cure Karina, because no one understands the art disease better than you. Duke Carlos, facing the Duke's sudden earnestness, felt somewhat uncomfortable. But looking at Million's lonely figure, Duke Carlos seemed to understand something. Meanwhile, Karina, whom the Duke was worried about, was banging her head against the wall. Because just now when she heard the Duke's words asking her to stay, she was actually very happy. But why did she say such heartbreaking words? Just as she was considering whether to go explain to Duke Million, Duke Carlos came to her room. He wanted to talk with Karina about her illness. And Karina, who was originally quite happy upon hearing this, suddenly felt a flash of panic in her heart. Could it be that Dr. Winston had told him about her condition? She had just recently begged him not to tell anyone about her terminal condition. Karina once again felt that sense of helplessness from betrayal. Seeing this, Duke Carlos quickly clarified that he was here at Million's request to help treat her art disease. "That's why I kept pressing Dr. Winston about your condition. He didn't tell me voluntarily. Besides, I've known from the beginning that your art disease was very serious, Miss Karina, because our Carlos family has kept ancient records about the art disease. After all, our Carlos family has been supporting artists since long ago. Among them were artists like you, who could create miracles. However, Miss Karina, your ability is even more powerful. According to records, drawn life forms rarely lived beyond a day, and there were no records of giving life to giant magical beasts. So theoretically, Miss Karina, your ability could be considered close to godlike omnipotence. But hearing this, Karina wasn't surprised. Instead, she smiled sadly, because she had never thought her ability would be so powerful. In the past, under her family's influence, she once believed she was the most useless lady in the family, not even worth being a vase. Then Duke Carlos. Did all the artists you knew use these abilities at the cost of their lives? Yes, as far as I know, artists with these abilities all got art disease. They all died before 30. They say they only focused on their paintings, with no interest in life. And they would become increasingly obsessed, eventually using their own flesh and blood as paint, unhesitatingly giving their lives for their artwork. So, Karina, I want to help you. But to truly help you, you can't hide anything from me, no matter how small. For the symptoms I'm about to describe, if you're experiencing any of them, you must tell me honestly. From what I know, creators with art disease not only become obsessed, but also become increasingly sensitive as time passes. They paint tirelessly, as if hypnotized, because they believe their created beings are the only ones who understand them, since they view these life forms as their everything. Hearing this, Karina closed her shocked lips tightly. These symptoms you mentioned, I have them all. As time passes, I not only become sensitive, I also paint without rest. But I can't stop, because in this world, no one would listen to my thoughts. Before I came here, no one ever cared about my feelings. Only the children I created would understand me. I was just too lonely. So, Karina, I'm not saying all this to blame you. I want you to understand that constantly avoiding it will only hurt you more in the end. If you keep pouring your anger, sadness, and loneliness into your paintings while ignoring those who truly care about you, you'll surely regret it. And I heard from Dr. Winston that you have less than a year to live. Is that right? Have you considered giving up painting? I've never thought about giving up painting, because painting is my whole life. Duke Carlos expressed his understanding of this, because he himself had devoted much energy to music since childhood. The joy that comes from creation cannot be easily given up. However, speaking of which, Karina, I have something I want to ask of you. His body was weak, showing signs of exhaustion, but he still forced himself to finish drawing the portal. Suddenly, a melodious flute sound came from nearby. It was Duke Carlos. His flute music had the ability to heal and restore energy. Hearing this beautiful, flowing flute music, Karina instantly felt her breathing become much smoother. Even her body felt much lighter. With Duke Carlos's flute music supporting her, Karina successfully completed the portal. Now she just needed to open this door, and she could immediately return to that unfortunate Count's mansion. Just as Karina wanted to thank Duke Carlos for his help earlier, she found Duke Carlos clutching his chest, staring at her shyly. Karina, I think I've fallen in love with you. The woman had simply drawn a picture, and it made her husband's good friend fall in love with her. This unprecedented betrayal descended upon Duke Million's head without his knowledge. And Karina, the person involved, was left speechless by this sudden confession. Her facial expression perfectly illustrated what it means to be dumbfounded. Duke Carlos also realized the inappropriateness of his words. He quickly changed the subject by referring to the flute music he had just played. The piece I just played was completely improvised, inspired by watching you paint. How did you find it? Karina's mouth gaped open in shock. Such a moving piece was improvised? That's truly amazing. Hearing Karina's praise, Duke Carlos smiled very happily. However, speaking of which, Karina, now you just need to go through this door to return to the Count's mansion. Yes, just need to open it. Hearing this definitive answer, Duke Carlos couldn't help but marvel. This is truly close to divine power. He wondered what her family was thinking. How could they show no care for their daughter when she was so exceptional? Opening the door, the two arrived at Karina's room in the Count's mansion. Upon entering, Duke Carlos couldn't help but ask, "Is this an unused room in the Count's mansion? There isn't even a decent piece of furniture." Looking at the room that remained exactly as she had left it, Karina said self-mockingly, "This is the room I used to live in." But she couldn't blame Duke Carlos for thinking that way. After all, young ladies' rooms were usually very nice. Her sister Abril's room was like that. Her room had many lace decorations, and even the curtains were colorful. Because I was always taking care care of my younger siblings before. I never had time to visit other people's homes. I guess other young ladies' rooms must be like that too. Looking at the dust accumulated from lack of cleaning, Karina abandoned the idea of leaving the letter here. If she left the letter here, they probably would never find it. With servants casually walking back and forth outside, it wouldn't be good if they discovered it. Hearing this, Duke Carlos said it wasn't a problem. I can help you with this. Since their daughter ran away from home, the once loving family began to change. The Count and Countess gradually grew distant and stopped talking to each other. Sister Aberil became listless, filled with sadness throughout her body. Brother Pelton remained silent. Godero simply stopped coming home altogether. The mansion's maids were suffocating in this depressing atmosphere. Just as they were hoping Karina would return soon to end all this, a melodious flute sound came from Karina's room. The previously gossipy maids all started yawning after hearing the flute music. Soon, everyone in the mansion who heard the flute fell into a deep sleep. The person responsible for all this was Duke Carlos. He had hypnotized everyone in the mansion with his flute music. This way, Karina wouldn't have to worry about being discovered coming back. Duke Carlos asked Karina if there was anyone she wanted to see after returning. Karina's answer was naturally no, because no one here had ever cared about her. Even when Duke Carlos had previously told her father about her terminal illness, Karina knew her father would definitely not believe it. Instead, he would think she was just pretending to be sick to make them sad. Unless she died right in front of him, he probably wouldn't regret anything. But after regretting, he would surely rage and question her corpse, blaming her for not telling them about her illness and making her parents sad until the very end. So Karina had long given up on the so-called relatives. Now she just wanted to quickly sever ties with her unloving parents. Before, she had always lived for her family, living to accommodate her brother, who rarely came home, taking care of her chronically ill younger siblings. But now, she decided to say goodbye to her former self. She wanted to live for herself in what little time she had left. She wanted to use her unparalleled talent, under the identity of the artist Karina, to leave her artwork in this world forever, to gain her parents' love. At an age when she should have been running happily in the sunshine, she quietly learned to be sensible. She would actively help her parents with their affairs, would decline her own tea parties, would take care of her sickly sister. She thought this would make her mother care about her more, would make her strict father like her more. But the result was exactly the opposite. Her sensibility and obedience became taken for granted in her parents' eyes. You're their older sister. It's your duty to take care of them. You're always at home while your brother is away. Now that he's finally home, shouldn't you accommodate him? Thus, under years of parental neglect, even she believed these were things she should do. Until she learned she had less than a year to live. Until she ran away from home and met someone who truly loved her. She finally awakened. So, she wrote a letter about severing ties with her father. With Duke Carlos's help, sent it back to the Count's mansion. When her father, the Count, saw this letter, he didn't recognize it at first. The Count looked at the handwriting and only felt it was somewhat familiar, until he read the words, "I am sick, so I won't return to the Count's mansion." Only then did he realize this letter was from Karina. He hadn't expected that after his last letter scolding her, not only did she not return immediately, but she would threaten him with such resolute words. The letter read, "I will no longer live as Karina Leopoldal. Instead, I will make my name known simply as Karina. Just watch. Your daughter, whom you thought was good for nothing, one day, her fame will spread from far away, all the way to where you are in the central region. Remember how you always taught me not to bring shame to the family? I've always followed your words well. So this time, I hope you'll remember these words too. Someday in the future, please don't tarnish my far-reaching reputation. Before, my life was only about family, but I realized you didn't seem to care. Now I've met someone who truly loves me. I'm in the midst of a heart-stirring romance. You know, it's because of his appearance that I understand my life doesn't have to revolve around family. He gave me courage and confidence, allowing me to boldly live as I wish. He would never raise his hand or call threats of throwing me out of the house an act of love. Only after meeting him did I realize love is gentle. So from now on, we will have no relationship." Reading this, the Count became furious, saying Karina was ungrateful for her parents' care. But when he saw the words that followed, his angry expression instantly turned to surprise. "I guess after reading the above, you must be furious and calling me an ungrateful child who doesn't appreciate her parents' nurturing. But I want to ask, from childhood until now, Have you ever truly listened to what I said? Was I really the good child who never cried from childhood? Upon reading this, the Count's mind was suddenly flooded with fragments of Karina's past life. In his impression, Karina had always worn a smiling face. He tried to piece together these blurry fragments, trying to remember when Karina stopped crying in front of him. However, no matter how hard the Count tried to piece it together, in the end, he couldn't remember. It wasn't that Karina hadn't told him, but rather that the words Karina spoke, he had never truly listened to. Years of neglect had turned into sharp fragments, causing Karina to bleed endlessly. By the way, if you still want to see me, come to the north, because I won't be returning. As for my funeral arrangements, do as you please. After reading this, the Count flew into a rage, cursing while ordering the butler beside him to immediately contact Duke Million and have him send that secret back immediately. But my lord, the north has entered winter. Magical beasts are appearing in large numbers. People cannot travel freely. So what? That child dares to say she has some incurable illness and tells us to handle her funeral arrangements ourselves. Is this how a daughter should speak to her parents? The butler hesitated upon hearing this. My lord, have you considered? Could it be that Miss Karina is really ill? He was sickly since childhood. Whenever he was sick, his sister would stay by his side. When he felt lonely, his sister would read him fairy tales and sleep beside him. And every time his sister went out, she would bring back many street snacks he had never tried before. Because of this, he became very dependent on his sister. To keep his sister by his side, he wouldn't let her meet friends. Even to prevent her from going out, he would deliberately pretend to be sick just so his sister would stay with him longer. Yet facing all he did, his sister never got angry with him. Instead, she went along with his wishes, spending even more time with him. But today, he learned from his father that his beloved sister had a terminal illness and was dying. Moreover, his sister apparently hadn't been happy at home before. He never imagined that his sister, who always smiled at him, had endured so much hardship at home. He felt deeply regretful for being so selfish back then, to the point that now he didn't even have the chance to apologize to his sister in person. He could only lie helplessly by his bed, crying sadly, "Sister, I'm sorry. I truly know I was wrong." Meanwhile, Karina, unaware of all this, was staring blankly at an old teddy bear wallet. This was the only birthday gift her mother had ever given her. It used to be her most precious possession, but now this gift no longer mattered. She used her ability again, drawing a little bird yearning for freedom, following her own wishes. She took this last tie to her family and threw it somewhere she could never find it again. Now she truly had no connection left with the Leopoldal family. This was a smokeless afternoon tea battlefield. What should have been Duke Million and Karina's sweet private world had become an ordinary threesome with Duke Carlos's sudden appearance. And Duke Million was very displeased with Duke Carlos's intrusion into his private time with Karina. Although Karina had actively invited Duke Carlos to join the afternoon tea party, Duke Million still felt extremely uncomfortable. He wondered why his good friend couldn't read the atmosphere. Therefore, Duke Million vented all his anger on Duke Carlos. For every word Duke Carlos said, Duke Million would retort. Back and forth, the originally warm and harmonious afternoon tea was forcibly turned into a major verbal battlefield by the two. At the scene, watching the two dukes behave like children, Karina couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. This laugh instantly made the sky explode, made iron trees bloom, and made the audience grow by 1.8 meters. The two quarreling dukes were suddenly dumbfounded. "Karina, why are you laughing so happily? Do you find us too amusing?" Hearing this, Karina continued laughing joyfully. "No, I just think you two have a great relationship, and I really like this." Speaking freely while eating, the dining table filled with laughter and joy. "These are all things I've always longed for." And as Million watched Karina's happy smile, he suddenly felt that annoying Duke Carlos didn't seem so bothersome anymore. As days passed by, Karina's condition became increasingly serious. To avoid worrying her loved ones and friends who cared about her, she would always lock herself in her room when she felt unwell, silently enduring the pain brought by her illness alone. If this had happened back in her days at the Count's mansion, Karina's behavior would never have been discovered. But now she was at the Duke's mansion. Here, there were people who truly loved and cared for her. So when Karina locked herself in her room, the The mansion servants immediately noticed something was wrong. They found Karina collapsed in her room from pain and immediately came forward to inquire about her condition. However, Karina didn't want to trouble those who were kind to her. She still forced a smile and said she was fine. But the maid insisted on notifying Dr. Winston, because this was what Duke Million emphasized every day. If Miss Karina shows any discomfort, Dr. Winston must be notified immediately. Soon, Dr. Winston arrived at Karina's room. After a careful examination, he found Karina's artistic disease had worsened compared to before. However, it wouldn't deteriorate rapidly in the short term. This was currently the only good news. But Karina wasn't concerned about this. She only cared whether she would continue vomiting frequently, because she didn't want Duke Million to see her suffering and worry about her. But Winston told her the vomiting symptoms might continue, and he seriously advised Karina not to stop eating just because she feared vomiting, because your current body is like a damaged sandcastle being hit by surging waves. Once you stop eating, the structure of the sandcastle will loosen and eventually collapse. And you must remember to maintain a firm will to live on, to have hope for survival. Hearing this, Karina couldn't help but recall the past. When she learned she had a terminal illness and would die soon, she wasn't scared. Instead, she felt incredibly relieved, because she finally had a reason to escape from this suffocating family. So back then, she chose to travel alone, chose to die quietly in a place where no one knew her. But now she was different. Here, she had met people who truly loved and cared for her. Here, she had her own interests, had her own goals to accomplish. So now she wasn't willing to die. She wanted to try hard to live on. When she was healthy, Mother didn't like him. She neglected his feelings and needs for years. Even the young ladies of lower status would say he was just a decorative piece who only followed behind his brothers and sisters. But when he was terminally ill and about to die, a group of people who truly loved and cared for him appeared by his side. Even the family members who previously disliked him felt a bit of regret for their past coldness towards him. Sensing this change, Karina couldn't help but feel regretful. If only she had known earlier that her life wasn't just about taking care of her siblings, that she could live so freely like this, then perhaps she would have escaped from that suffocating family much earlier. Here, Karina found meaning in living. Therefore, she now fully cooperated with the doctor's diagnosis. When Dr. Winston warned her that she must not stop eating and must maintain a strong will to live, Karina actively agreed to comply, because here she had a lover she couldn't part with, and friends who genuinely cared about her. And Dr. Winston, seeing that Karina had regained a normal person's desire to live, couldn't help but recall when he first met Karina. Back then, when Karina learned she had a terminal illness and was going to die, she didn't show any emotional fluctuation of fear. Instead, her whole being was filled with relief and longing. This situation was unimaginable even for him, a doctor who had seen all kinds of life and death, a person who had no fear of death, but instead felt extremely relieved and liberated. What had they experienced in their life? But fortunately, Karina now had ignited hope for life. So Dr. Winston left the remaining matters to Duke Carlos. Duke Carlos, who was more knowledgeable about the artistic disease, would explain to Karina about the taboos of the artistic disease. A few days ago, after Duke Carlos had observed Karina using the power of miracles, he had a question in his mind. That is, according to the way Karina used the miracle power, her condition was deteriorating at an abnormal speed. Because, according to the many years of inheritance in Duke Carlos's family, the reason miracle creators had short lifespans was because they didn't create many miracles. But even so, those who used miracle power more times than Karina lived longer than Karina's current state. So Duke Carlos's main purpose this time was to ask Karina if she knew about any absolute taboos when using miracle power. However, facing this question, Karina naturally didn't know. Therefore, Duke Carlos felt even more sympathy for Karina's situation. If only Karina hadn't grown up in an environment where her family ignored her, her current physical condition wouldn't be this bad. Because if her parents had cared about her and hired an art teacher for Karina, her physical condition wouldn't have deteriorated to this irreversible state. Although it was a bit late now, Duke Carlos felt it was still better to let Karina know. Therefore, he began to tell Karina about the absolute taboos regarding the artistic disease. Simply put, the taboos that miracles cannot violate are like a doctor saving people. Although that doctor can treat illnesses and save lives, due to their limited medical skills, they cannot treat severely injured patients. That's their limit. And for those who can willfully exceed their limits, that's violating the taboo. There are 3 taboos that must never be touched. The first point is, one cannot violate the laws of nature. For example, bringing the dead back to life, or making time flow backwards to change things that have already happened. The second point is that you cannot create humans. Although your miracle can create plants, animals, and even magical beasts, only God can create humans. And we absolutely cannot invade God's domain. Then the most important point is that miracles absolutely cannot be used to harm. Because miracle power is almost omnipotent, it means that those who use miracles cannot do things humans shouldn't do. If someone violates these rules, the price of violation is their own life. So Karina, have you violated any of these taboos? Facing Duke Carlos's inquiry, Karina nervously swallowed. Then with a guilty expression, she indicated she hadn't violated these taboos. However, Duke Carlos didn't notice these unnatural small movements. Because if Karina had truly violated the taboos, she certainly wouldn't be alive now. But this made her wonder, why was Karina's condition deteriorating so quickly? And it was precisely because of this thought that she didn't notice. When she mentioned the second taboo about not creating humans, Karina's whole body had startled for a moment. If Duke Million, who knew Karina better, had been present, he would certainly have noticed that Karina was lying again. Finally, Duke Carlos temporarily stopped his thoughts. He suggested a method to alleviate Karina's condition. That was to have Karina stop painting 1 second before completion. Because if the painting stops before completion, the miracle cannot be activated. This way could satisfy Karina's need to paint, while preventing miracles from occurring and deteriorating her body. For this treatment method, Carlos gave it a revolutionary name, commonly called freeloading, just like what was said in the 9th-grade official. If you play but don't pay, it doesn't count as selling. If Karina's miracle power could speak, it would have to say about this treatment method. Finally, Duke Carlos extended his hand to Karina, offering some suggestions. He requested Karina to hand over those unfinished paintings to him. He would, according to Karina's wishes, make Karina into a unique and famous painter. Let Karina's name resound throughout the world. Let those family members who once ignored her see how extraordinary that ordinary second daughter in their eyes truly was. Her sickly younger sister Abel, her life was once given by her sister Karina. Because although she and her brother Pelton were born at the same time, her twin brother Pelton was born very healthy. But she had been constantly coughing since birth, requiring doctors to care for her year-round. Plus, when Duke Carlos told Karina that miracles absolutely cannot be used to create humans, Karina's unusual reaction. This led me, the blogger, to make a bold guess. It's possible that when Sister Abel was born, she was about to die. And at that time, Karina happened to discover her sister's condition. But because she didn't want to lose her sister and didn't want her mother to be sad, so she used the power of miracles. At the cost of her own life, she gave life to her dying sister. That's why her condition deteriorated so quickly. Even the Carlos family, who had studied this illness for years, couldn't understand why. Of course, these are just my speculations. If you have any unique insights, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's return to the story. At this time, after receiving knowledge about miracle powers, Karina was alone, thinking of Duke Million under the moonlight. Because Duke Million had left several days ago to suppress rampaging magical beasts around the territory and hadn't returned. This made Karina worried, wondering if he had encountered danger. But as soon as this thought appeared, Karina quickly shook her head. Everything will be fine. To distract herself, she once again took out that death wish notebook and began writing. Thanks to Duke Carlos, her wish to make friends had now been fulfilled. So next was to give a gift to her loved one and to embrace her loved one. But when Karina thought about passionately embracing Duke Million, she blushed. She quickly waved her hands, trying to clear those scenes that viewers wouldn't be interested in from her mind. And while Karina was fighting with the evil thoughts in her mind, Duke Million had already appeared in her room. Actually, Duke Million had returned before Karina started her wild imagination. When he stood outside Karina's room and knocked for a long time with no response, he took the liberty of entering Karina's room. Duke Million, who had been worried that Karina had fainted. Upon seeing Karina's shy appearance under the moonlight, his worried emotions instantly transformed into deep affection. She's really cute. However, when he heard Karina mention Duke Carlos's name, he was suddenly alarmed. Something was wrong, very wrong indeed. This is probably what love looks like at its most beautiful. When I think of you, you appear before my eyes immediately, and your first words must be about caring for me. Although Karina and Million hadn't seen each other for just 2.5 days, both felt like it had been 2.5 years. And due to the winter magical beast uprising, the time they had together wasn't much. After just a few words, Duke Million had to leave again to suppress the magical beasts. This made Karina very reluctant to part. They had just met and had to separate again. And Duke Million, to avoid making Karina sad, promised he would return the day after tomorrow evening. But when he looked up and saw Karina's pitiful expression, he immediately changed his return time to noon. But after she said that, she felt a bit regretful. Even at her fastest, she wouldn't return until night. Saying noon was lying to her. But the next second, her eyes widened in shock, because under the bright starry sky, Karina said, "I'll wait for you." And these words had a magical effect, prompting the Duke to set out overnight at full speed to fight the monster. But this was tough on his knights below. "Your Grace, you're going too fast." The knights can barely keep up, but the Duke was unconcerned. "You're already tired?" So he took the lead. "I'll lead the way then. Just follow behind me." Meanwhile, in his mind, he recalled Karina smiling under the moonlight, saying she would wait for him. "Don't worry, Karina. No difficulty can prevent our promise." Soon, the monster hunting group arrived at their destination. Mylian felt the monster's roars coming from deep in the forest. He immediately ordered everyone to rest in place. Wait until tomorrow. It was time to make those who wasted his time with Karina pay the price. For a promise, Duke Mylian set out overnight to fight monsters, in weather that was minus 50 degrees at night, fighting with fierce monsters. And all he did was just to quickly quell the uprising of the poisonous red snake. To be able to meet on time, the one who smiled under the moonlight, saying she would wait. But just as Duke Mylian was planning how to eliminate the monsters next, a monster herda emerged from the nearby woods. Seeing this, Mylian wasn't scared, but rather pleased. "Great, it came to us on its own. This will speed up the monster elimination time." With Duke Mylian's command, the well-trained knights quickly dispersed, instantly surrounding this lone monster herda. But just when Duke Mylian thought victory was assured, the surrounded monster herda, then the ground beneath everyone suddenly began to shake. Pairs of glowing eyes suddenly appeared out of nowhere. A group of frenzied monster herdas instantly surrounded Mylian and his men. One young knight trembled in fear. "When did these stupid monsters learn to trap people?" He turned his pleading gaze towards you who was fighting with the monsters. And Duke Mylian, who was in a killing frenzy, hadn't anticipated this. Now all their escape routes were blocked by suddenly appearing monsters. But fortunately, with Karina's previous help, they had already found Monster Herda's weakness. As the sharp blade pierced into Monster Herda's body, the Monster Herda fighting Duke Mylian instantly lost its life. The exhausted Duke Mylian quickly spoke up. "Everyone remember the weak point I just attacked. If we hit the weak point, we can easily defeat them." However, just as Duke Mylian finished speaking, an exceptionally powerful monster silently appeared behind Duke Mylian. Before Duke Mylian could react, it delivered a fatal strike. Meanwhile, Karina was still in the snowy borderlands, eagerly awaiting Duke Mylian's return. But after waiting most of the day, but only receive an alert that a large group of herda beasts were attacking. This made Karina's heart ache inexplicably. Please don't let anything happen. Just as Duke Million went out to quell the beast uprising, he encountered an ambush and his fate was unknown. A large number of herda beasts surrounded the city where Karina was. Moreover, because earlier when the Duke left overnight to suppress the beasts, he took most of the elite knights from the city. Therefore, the city's defensive forces were now unprecedentedly weak. So, facing this sudden arrival of numerous raging beasts, the already weak defense line immediately became precarious. Karina, inside the city, watched anxiously. Was there any way she could help them? Then she saw her painting. "Right, I can use the power of miracles." And in this painting, There was still the half-finished herd of beasts that she had stopped painting. Now if she could complete it, add colors, and give it life, then she could use its power to resist the raging beasts outside the city. But just as Karina was about to complete the painting, she became worried. Could a single herd of beasts created by herself resist the thousands of beasts surging outside the city? Obviously, this was impossible. While Karina was struggling with this dilemma, the guards on the city wall reported that the tower was about to be breached. This made Karina even more anxious. What should she do? Suddenly, in Karina's mind, she recalled something Duke Carlos had once told her. Some artists with miraculous powers, they would use their own blood as paint to create works far beyond their normal level. So Karina had a bold idea. If she used her own blood as paint to give life to the herd of beasts, would it become much stronger? But Duke Carlos had also seriously warned her. This method would cause severe damage to the body, practically no different from suicide. So Karina hesitated, because she had promised Duke Million that she would try her best to stay alive. But when Karina saw the soldiers on the city wall fighting with the herd of beasts, she immediately made up her mind. I'm sorry, Million. I can't just watch as the beasts break through the walls. I can't just watch as the place we live together gets destroyed. Since I came here, you've always taken care of me, protected me. You showed me what love is, what warmth is. You let me live as my true self. So this time, let me take your place. Let me protect everything here in your stead. With life as canvas, blood as paint, using her remaining time as the price, just to create one powerful beast, to repel the thousands of beasts surging outside the city. On the city wall, soldiers were reporting the latest battle situation to the butler. We've sent carrier pigeons to the Duke, but haven't received any response yet. Due to the increasing number of Helta monsters outside the city, our defense line won't hold for much longer. Hearing this, the butler was about to turn around to take Karina away from this dangerous place. But before he could act, a powerful Helta monster broke through the city tower. The well-trained soldiers immediately formed a defensive formation. It's a monster. A monster has broken in, but to everyone's surprise, a familiar voice sounded from behind the monster. It's me. Don't worry, Karina. He won't attack us. Facing this situation, everyone was confused. But Karina had no time to explain to everyone. She turned to the Helta monster beside her. I need your help now, before Million returns. Can you help me keep those monsters outside the city? As a creature created by Karina, this Helta monster naturally agreed to her request. After nodding to Karina, it immediately turned and jumped down from the 100-meter-high city wall. Opening its huge bloody mouth, it charged towards the tens of thousands of monster nests below the wall. Upon entering the battle, this Helta monster displayed its immense power. In just an instant, it tore through the dense monster nests. Seeing this from the city wall, Karina couldn't help but exclaim how amazing it was. But suddenly, Karina heard a strange voice. Karina looked around surprised, but no one else showed any unusual reaction. Karina found it strange, wondering if she was hearing things. Suddenly, Karina realized, could this be the voice of the Helta monster? The Helta in the center of the monster nest was now searching through mountains of monster corpses. As its movements became faster, the voice in Karina's mind grew more urgent. Where is my door? Ah, here it is. The monster, she painted with blood, had developed its own independent consciousness. One maddening voice after another kept echoing in Karina's mind. The Helta monster was there, constantly searching through the mountain-like pile of corpses. But to outsiders, this behavior looked like it was devouring its own kind's corpses. Is that Helta eating its own kind? Miss Karina, is it okay for it to eat its own kind? However, Karina was no longer there. She was anxiously running towards the Helta monster as new dialogues appeared in her mind. It was a conversation between Helta and other surviving monsters. I haven't decided yet today. How dare you mock me by coming up? As soon as it finished speaking, the Helta monster charged towards the last few surviving monsters, intending to kill them all right there. However, at this moment, Karina, who had reached the battlefield, stopped it. Helta, let them go. Don't kill them all. Herta was very obedient and immediately returned to Karina's side. After the remaining magical beasts retreated, Karina quickly asked her burning question. What were you looking for just now? And what's the story with your master? However, the magical beast Herta had already returned to her normal state. She was also very confused by Karina's questions. Just as Karina was about to continue asking, behind her, there was suddenly the sound of urgent hoofbeats. It was Duke Million. He had returned, and immediately, he protected Karina, who was in front of the magical beast Kolta in his arms. Everyone listen, leave this Herdo alone. She's mine. For a moment, there was an awkward atmosphere between the two people and the beast. Karina, what do you mean by that? I said this Herdo was drawn by me, used to resist the tide. Upon hearing this, Duke Million's face darkened. Didn't you promise me not to use the power of miracles anymore? Don't you know this will have a big impact on your body? Harlina looked guilty and could only explain softly, but the situation was very urgent at that time. What about Duke Carlos? Didn't she have any other options? You mentioned Duke Carlos, but I haven't seen her. At this moment, the protagonist of their discussion had just woken up from a nap and was constantly complaining. Didn't Harlina say Million would return at noon? But there's still no sign of him. This is really unpunctual. The magical beast she drew using her own blood as paint had escaped her control, unable to be returned to the painting. So when Duke Carlos just woke up, she saw an angry Duke Million, a guilty-looking Karina, and a confused magical beast Herda appear before her. Instantly, Duke Carlos had an urge to go home to find her mother. The three people in the living room were silent. The atmosphere was extremely strange. One was waiting for the other to give an explanation. One was too guilty to know how to speak, and another had no idea what was happening. Finally, Karina retold the process of the Magical Beast project. However, she intentionally concealed the fact that she used her blood to create the magical beast, because she didn't want to make Duke Million more worried. Finally, Duke Million sighed helplessly. What reason did he have to blame Terina, who had fought with all her might against the tide? He even thought if he could have returned earlier, then Karina wouldn't have been hurt. And Duke Carlos, seeing the scene of both considering each other, couldn't help but burst into laughter. You two really look like a perfect match. But back to the point, Karina, this time you really can't make her to disappear like before. You don't know, just now when I saw her appear before me, I was almost scared to death. To this, Karina expressed her apology. I've tried many times, but I can't return the magical beast herded to the painting. It's like she has escaped from my control. However, what we can be sure of now is that she still listens to me and won't run around attacking people. Duke Carlos found it strange. This was the first time she had heard of a miracle losing control. By the way, Karina, since you created the magical beast herda until now, has anything strange happened? Upon hearing this, Karina immediately recalled that after repelling the beast horde, the magical beast herda seemed to have eaten something. Suddenly, a mouthful of crimson blood spewed from Karina's mouth. Strange, I don't feel any pain in my body. This was Karina's last thought before losing consciousness and falling. Karina was finally dying. She who originally had only 1 year left to live after experiencing this tide engineering incident. Her already fragile body finally couldn't hold on anymore. At this moment, she felt as if her heart was being tightly gripped and constantly crushed. That fear of approaching death made her unable to hold on any longer. Painfully shedding tears, Mylene, it hurts so much. I don't want to die like this. Well, Mylene, it really hurts. I feel like my heart is being torn apart. And Mylene, watching Karina in pain, all she could do was hold her tightly in her arms. At this moment, she hated herself so much. Why couldn't she help Karina? Why could she only watch helplessly as she endured such great pain, unable to share her burden? Why was she so useless? Finally, Karina stopped her painful cries, and at the same time, her hand fell lifelessly from Duchess Mylene's face. She had fainted from the pain, and at this moment, Duke Carlos brought Dr. Winston, hurriedly arriving at the scene, and immediately handed Duchess Mylene what appeared to be a precious gem. This is heron. It's something that only forms in the bodies of powerful magical beasts. Mylene quickly give this to Karina. It will help her. Indeed, as the heron got closer, Karina's breathing immediately became more stable. Even her previously pained expression returned to normal. After leaving the unconscious Karina to Dr. Winston's examination, the two left the room. Outside the room, Duchess Mylene, upon learning that the cause of Karina's illness was that magical beast herda, immediately wanted to eliminate it. But she was stopped by Duke Carlos, because the magical beast herda had already shown signs of transformation and had now broken free from Karina's control. So even if you kill it now, it won't make Karina better. After hearing this, Duchess Mylene immediately began blaming herself again. If I hadn't come back late, Karina wouldn't have ended up like this. I'm the one who caused her such pain, but I couldn't do anything. I'm really useless. As Mylene sank deeper into self-blame, Duke Carlos interrupted her. Actually, there is a way to ease Karina's pain. You saw it just now, didn't you? When you brought the heron close to Karina, her breathing immediately stabilized. So I suspect that heron might become a treatment for the art disease. Because I've been researching recently, I discovered it can resonate with my miracle. That feeling is like it's trying to neutralize my miracle. Plus, before Karina fell unconscious, she mentioned that the magical beast Herda she created after killing other beasts kept searching through the bodies of its kind, and eventually seemed to have eaten something. Therefore, I speculate that the reason why the monster Herda broke free from Karina's control is most likely because it consumed heron from the bodies of its own kind, thus neutralizing Karina's miracle power. However, these are just my guesses. I need more heron to verify. Duke Million smiled upon hearing this. Then leave this to me. Now winter is approaching. Those hungry monsters will soon come in hordes. That's when the subjugation will officially begin, and those monster leaders' bodies must contain larger amounts of heron. For Karina's sake, I will kill them all and bring back the heron. After Karina violated the taboo of using miracle power to take life, her body began to deteriorate rapidly. Her already limited life force was quickly draining away. Fortunately, Duke Carlos discovered in time that the heron and monster bodies could alleviate her condition. This prevented Karina from dying immediately. But even so, Karina's condition was inevitably getting worse. Time flew by and winter arrived. Karina still spent her days as usual, doing the things she loved. And Duke Million, after experiencing Karina fainting in pain in his arms, while he was helpless to do anything, became even more attentive in caring for her. He would monitor her daily food intake, and every night he would stay by her side until she fell asleep as she feared darkness. On this day, Karina was drawing as usual, but without paying attention, she accidentally completed the entire painting. Instantly, miracle power manifested, and beautiful butterflies flew out from Karina's painting. Although she had promised Duke Carlos not to complete any more paintings, but since you're already drawn out, let's play for a while before you go. Saying this, Karina opened the window, letting the butterflies dance under the azure sky. This is truly beautiful. After a while, when the butterflies disappeared, Karina carefully checked to ensure no one had discovered them. But when she saw Duke Million downstairs, watching her, she knew she had been caught. What should I do? Looking at his expression, just now he's clearly angry. What should I do? Karina anxiously stamped her feet, but the inevitable would come. Soon after, Duke Million's voice was heard at the door. Karina, you really? I didn't mean to. I was just too absorbed in painting and didn't notice for a moment. I really didn't mean to. Seeing Karina's timid appearance, Million couldn't stay angry anymore. Finally, he could only sigh helplessly. Karina, do you know how worried I am about you? I know if I force you to give up painting, you would be devastated. So, I don't want to force you to do things you don't like. But I hope you will take better care of yourself. Because if possible, I want to stay with you longer. Hearing these words, Karina was deeply moved. But at the same time, her heart was filled with sadness. Why did I have to meet the man I want to spend my life with in these final moments? When facing Karina, Duke Million would always show his most relaxed side, but in private, he was under enormous pressure. In order to help alleviate Karina's condition, Duke Million would go out every day to fight magical beasts, just to obtain the Halen within the magical beasts, because he had learned from Duke Carlos that Halen could potentially become the foundation for treating the art disease. And every day, he would check with Duke Carlos about Karina's condition. But on this day, when he learned from Duke Carlos that Karina's condition had worsened again, and some painkillers were no longer effective, Duke Million fell into self-blame once again. He's in so much pain, yet I can't do anything. Seeing this, Duke Carlos teased him, saying, "Have you fallen in love with Karina? I remember at your engagement party before, you told me yourself that you found her troublesome." Hearing this, Million stubbornly turned his head. "I just can't bear to see someone die before me." After Duke Carlos left, Million came to the window alone. Watching Karina playing with magical beasts in the garden, he fell into thought. When did he start paying attention to her? He remembered when Karina first arrived. He thought she looked pretty, and when she took out the marriage contract to cancel it, he was happy about it, thinking he could finally put down this burden. Without realizing when it started, he would unconsciously watch her. When she wasn't in his sight, he would worry if she was spacing out somewhere, and his mood would become very bad because of it. But every time he saw her smile, his terrible mood would immediately improve. Sometimes he wondered if when he first met Karina, he had gotten along well with her. Would her physical condition be better now? Would their relationship be closer? If they were closer, would I be able to kiss her then? Legend has it that at the end of the sea, there is an immense mountain range. The northern people call it the end of winter. That mountain range is extremely mysterious. It's said no one has ever reached it, and no one knows what lies beyond those mountains. Some say it's where gods live. Others say it's the domain of demons. And some say extinct dragons live there. But in my view, these rumors are quite exaggerated, especially the legends about dragons. And the so-called end of winter is nothing but a cliff. Karina heard this and had a different perspective. No matter what people say, I think end of winter is actually a beautiful name. Duke Million was surprised. You think this name is good? Of course, because after winter ends comes spring. Maybe that place connects to spring. Duke Million was stunned. Spring could be interpreted this way. You should know that in the north, the end of winter symbolizes eternal death. Because people believe if winter thaws, then everything in the world would disappear. But unexpectedly, from a different perspective within eternal death, yet it contains the vibrant vitality of spring. Karina, your perspective on things is truly unique. I really want to see the world through your eyes now. Through my eyes? That would be very boring. How could it be boring? Your eyes are so beautiful. Everything you see must be beautiful too. Karina never expected Duke Million to interpret it this way. These intense and direct words made his heart beat uncontrollably. He's really so gentle. Suddenly Karina remembered something. All right, Million, I have a gift for you. Duke Million was surprised, but when he looked at the thing in his hand, he had some doubts. Is this words? This is medicine. It's for healing wounds. Recently, magical beasts have been frequently rampaging. I'm worried you might get hurt fighting them. So this is medicine I created through imagination. It can instantly heal any injury, but it can't heal creatures whose forms can't be identified, nor save those on the brink of death. However, right now it has no effect, because it can only be fully created after I go back and complete the canvas. I believe this potion will definitely help you. But Duke Million showed no joy upon hearing this. Instead, he looked at Karina very seriously. Karina, I know you're considering my safety, but I, Million, don't need medicine obtained through your pain. You should know in my heart, your health is more important than anything else. Legend has it that at the end of the sea, there is an immense mountain range. The northern people call it the end of winter. That mountain range is extremely mysterious. It's said no one has ever reached it, and no one knows what place those mountains connect to. Some say it's where gods live. Others say it's the realm of demons. Some even say extinct dragons live there. But in my view, these rumors are quite exaggerated, especially the legends about dragons. And the so-called end of winter is just a cliff. But Karina had a different perspective. No matter what people say, I think end of winter is truly a beautiful name. Duke Million was surprised. You think this name is good? Of course, because the end of winter means spring is coming. Maybe it connects to spring. Duke Million was stunned. Spring could be interpreted this way. You should know that in the north, the end of winter symbolizes eternal death. Because people believe that if winter ends, everything in the world would disappear. But unexpectedly, from a different perspective, within eternal death lies the vibrant vitality of spring. Karina, your perspective on things is truly unique. I really want to see the world through your eyes now. Through my eyes? That would be very boring. How could it be boring? Your eyes are so beautiful. Everything you see must be beautiful too. Karina never expected Duke Million to interpret it this way. These intense and direct words made her heart beat uncontrollably. He is really so gentle. Suddenly, Karina remembered something. Oh, right, Million, I have a gift for you. Duke Million was surprised, but when he looked at what was in his hand, sometimes thread by thread, is this words. This is medicine, medicine for healing wounds. Recently, magical beasts have been frequently rampaging. I'm worried you'll get hurt fighting them. So this is medicine I created through imagination. It can instantly heal any injury, but it cannot heal creatures whose forms cannot be recognized, nor save those near death. However, right now it has no effect, because only after I return and complete the brush can I fully create it. I believe this potion will definitely help you. But hearing this, Duke Million showed no joy. Instead, he looked at Karina very seriously. Karina, I know you're considering my safety, but I, Million, don't need medicine obtained through your pain. You should know, in my heart, your health is more important than anything else. Karina's condition was getting worse. Just now, while painting, Karina suddenly felt that. Her hand that was painting lost sensation for a moment. She knew this was a sign of her condition worsening again. But she had no time to think about it, because tonight, the Duke's mansion was holding an extremely important banquet. It was the Eve feast unique to the North, held at a specific time every year. At that time, representatives from all northern nobles would attend to discuss winter beast hunting matters together. And Karina, as Duke Milan's nominal fiancée, naturally had to attend the banquet. So she needed to prepare for the banquet now. But when Karina went down the stairs, she felt inexplicably dizzy, followed by a sudden sharp pain. The intense pain and dizzy weightlessness caused Karina to collapse weakly on the stairs. Karina knew this was a sign her body was about to collapse. But how could this be? Didn't Dr. Winston say, "I still had 4 months? Am I going to die now?" In an instant, Karina thought of many things. Should she tell Milan about this situation? Although he always emphasized to tell him about any discomfort, but he had already given too much for her. Karina knew she would die, so she didn't want Milan to get too involved, because it wasn't fair to him. However, the immense pain prevented her from standing up. Suddenly, she thought of painting, because during a previous attack, Karina had accidentally discovered that using the power of miracles during an attack could greatly reduce the pain. But this method was no different from suicide. It was like trading her life for a fast-acting painkiller. But the current gathering was particularly important. So Karina still decided to use this method, because in her final time, she didn't want to cause trouble for Duke Milan, who cared about her. Karina was approaching death. Only 4 months remained, and as time passed, her episodes became increasingly frequent. And each time she had an attack, it was accompanied by immense pain, and that feeling was like being repeatedly crushed by a 50-ton truck. During these episodes, Karina could only endure, because all pain-relieving medications had lost their effect on her. However, this time, Karina wanted to use the power of miracles to ease her pain, because she wanted to accompany Duke Milan tonight to attend an important gathering in the north. The price for doing this was consuming what little remained of her lifespan. Perhaps to us, Karina's behavior seems very foolish. After all, what could be more important than life itself? But Karina felt it was all worth it, because before dying she didn't want to trouble those who cared for and loved her. However, just as Karina struggled to get up to go to the studio, she ran into Milan, who had come to check on her condition. Due to this sudden encounter, Karina found herself at a loss for words. When Duke Milan saw Karina's pale face, he immediately realized she was having another episode. So Duke Milan stepped forward and picked up the suffering Karina in his arms like a princess, and gently whispered, "Don't speak, let me take you to rest first." At this moment, Karina, lying in the Duke's arms, knew she was destined not to accompany Milan tonight. In the evening room, Karina apologetically said to Milan, "I'm sorry, I seem to have troubled you again." But hearing this, Milan just gently stroked her burning forehead and said, "Karina, you don't need to apologize. I don't find you troublesome at all. If you're in pain, just cry it out. It hurts me to see you hiding your pain. And in front of me, you don't need to pretend to be strong. You can be completely honest." Hearing these words, Karina thought of her former family. Why had none of those family members who lived under the same roof for over 20 years ever seen through her tough exterior facade? Yet this man, whom she'd only known for a few months, could easily discover her fragile heart. In an instant, Karina's grief turned to tears, flowing continuously from her eyes. Why was this? And Duke Milan quickly held Karina tightly in his embrace, and with his broad palm, gently patted Karina's back. "Karina, just cry if you want to. In front of me, you can fully express your feelings and be your true self." Hearing these gentle and sincere words, Karina felt the pain from her episode seemed to lessen somewhat. But having grown up in a family where she was never valued, when suddenly being cared for like this, she couldn't help but have insecure thoughts. If she hadn't been sick, would Milan still be so considerate towards her? Because from childhood, growing up in an environment where she was neither valued nor cared for, so Karina, when faced with others' kindness, always had some doubts and lack of confidence. Therefore, when facing Duke Milan's gentle and caring affection, she would always uncontrollably think negatively. Is he being so gentle and caring because he pities me? Is he pitying someone who grew up without love and care? Is he pitying me because I'm about to die? If I had no life left, then would Milan still be so interested in me? If I wasn't sick, Would we have held our wedding as planned and lived an ordinary married life? Slowly, Karina thought more and more, but when she came back to her senses, she found that her tears had wet Duke Million's formal attire for the evening banquet. So Karina immediately became flustered and anxious. But Duke Million said it was fine. He would just change it to another one. Moreover, he was worried that Karina would feel burdened by this. He specifically explained to Karina that tonight's banquet wasn't important. He described the North's most important eve of the year as just a regular gathering where everyone drinks and chats together. But Karina understood that this was just Duke Million comforting her. After Duke Million left, she started overthinking again. She wondered if she were truly healthy. Would Million's feelings for her change from sympathy to love? Karina admitted, during these months of interaction, she had fallen in love with this man who cared for her so thoroughly. But she also knew she could never be with Duke Million. Because she was a dying person, she couldn't give Million lasting companionship. But even so, Karina still couldn't control her greedy behavior. She hoped that Million's feelings for her contained a hint of love. But finally, she fell weakly onto the bed. Using a self-mocking tone to admonish herself, Karina, don't be delusional. Million is only kind to you because you're sick. Give up, you're going to die soon. So you two can never be together. However, what Karina didn't know was, after Duke Million left her room, he went straight to the butler and seriously instructed the butler to take good care of Karina, not allowing anyone to disturb her rest. He also asked the butler to inform the northern nobles that the eve ceremony would be postponed by one day, because he had just learned from his conversation with Karina that Karina wanted to accompany him to the eve ceremony. So to fulfill his beloved woman's wish, Duke Million made this decision against tradition. But this way, only the butler was left to deal with the consequences. Watching Duke Million's departing figure, he silently complained, pursing his lips, saying postponement was decided just like that. But I'm the one who has to implement it. Moreover, postponing the eve ceremony has never happened before. Those northern nobles will surely oppose when they find out. Then I'll be the one getting verbally attacked again. This isn't good for my facial skin. Looks like it's time to ask for a raise. Duke Million and Karina. Finally, they expressed their feelings for each other, and Duke Millane got his wish to kiss Karina. When faced with this sudden kiss, Karina didn't choose to resist. Instead, as if she had rehearsed it countless times in her mind, she responded eagerly and passionately to Duke Millane. After a long while, their lips reluctantly parted, but as they gradually calmed down, the atmosphere in the room began to turn strange again, and their thoughts were quite different from each other. Duke Millane was carefully savoring that touch of softness. Did we just kiss? Since we kissed, does that mean we're together now? And that feeling just now was so amazing. Can I do it again? No, Karina needs rest now. I can't keep disturbing her. Right, the heron. Karina needs heron to cure her illness. Those winter-crazed magical beasts. Just wait, I'll personally extract all the heron from your bodies. While Duke Millen's thoughts were excitedly flying, Karina beside him was clearly worried. Has Millane developed feelings for me too? Although I love him too. I love how it feels when he holds my hand, love the warmth of his palm when he pats my head. I love Millane, I love everything about him. But doesn't this mean I've crossed a line? My initial purpose in coming here was to find a place where no one cared about me and peacefully die, wasn't it? But now, I've made the innocent Duke Millane develop special feelings for me. No, Karina can't allow Duke Millane to have feelings for her, because she knew deeply how cruel it was to develop such special feelings for someone who was dying. Karina didn't want Millane to suffer alone after her death. So Karina spoke up. Millane, you're really a considerate person. Although this is my first time being comforted with a kiss, but thanks to you, I feel much better now. Hearing this, Millen's face changed. What? Do you think I was just comforting you with that kiss? Duke Millane had finally expressed his feelings to Karina and successfully kissed her. He thought that after breaking through this barrier, they could be together and spend every day happily and sweetly. But Karina knew deeply that she was a dying person. She couldn't give Millane long-term companionship, so she couldn't indulge in momentary pleasure, only to leave Duke Millane alone in this world, tormented by longing. She couldn't be so selfish. So, Karina described the Duke's kiss as comfort, treating his love as mere concern. Thank you, Millane. This is my first time being comforted with a kiss. I feel much better now. Hearing these words, Duke Millen's heart sank. Comfort? Was my action just seen as comfort in Karina's eyes? Duke Millen admitted that he was a bit impulsive just now, because ever since he first saw Karina, he began to be deeply attracted to this runaway girl. At first, he thought Karina was just a troublesome person who needed his care. But slowly, she started to enter his heart. From the initial awkwardness when helping Karina fix her hair, to becoming skilled and natural without realizing when. He got used to having her by his side every day. He loved her, but now, Karina dismissed his love as mere comfort. Although Million knew Karina was being dishonest, his heart still felt some pain, but he didn't argue about it. He respected all of Karina's choices. So after a brief moment of silence, Million spoke. Karina, if saying that makes you feel better, then consider what just happened as comfort. But you silly girls should understand that you really have no talent for acting, because your expression right now looks like an abandoned puppy. All right, just go to sleep now. I'll be watching over you outside. If you feel unwell, you can call me anytime. After Duke Demiline left, Karina remained lost in thought for a long time. She's really so gentle. I said such hurtful things, but she didn't get angry at me. Instead, she worried and comforted me gently. She knew I was lying, but didn't argue with me. Why did I have to meet her when I'm about to die? Finally, Karina could only bury her head deep in the blanket, softly expressing her true feelings. Duke Million, I like you too, but we can never be together. Recently, in the imperial capital, an unknown artist named Terina suddenly appeared. No one knew who she was or where she came from. People only knew she was a genius artist suffering from an artistic illness. It was said that anyone who saw Karina's paintings would feel like they were entering the world within the painting. People couldn't help but speculate about who artist Karina really was. Some guessed she was a child. Others said she was just a famous artist using a different name. Despite all the speculation, the Carlos family, who were behind all this, would only agree to auction off unknown artist Karina's paintings. They remained silent about any other information regarding the unknown artist Karina. But even so, unknown artist Karina's paintings attracted nobles from all over the empire. Among the nobles, it even became a trend to take pride in owning one of Karina's paintings. At the Carlos family's auction, nobles would fight over Karina's paintings. Even old friends would fall out over them. Seeing this, Duke Carlos below the stage couldn't help but sigh. It seemed he had underestimated Karina's talent in painting. At this moment, he looked forward to when Karina's name would spread across the continent through these nobles' mouths. How would those family members who once ignored her react? Surely, when they learned that the one they once saw as ordinary has become so outstanding, they would definitely regret it. But what Duke Carlos didn't know was, when Karina's father heard the news of her fame, his first reaction was still denial. Because in his eyes, Karina would always be just a disobedient, thoughtless, and very ordinary daughter. They say children who are favored are fortunate. But what if you're that favored child? Parents who play favorites will never admit they're biased, even though their own daughter has incredible talents that everyone envies. Yet they simply refuse to believe it, even when someone personally told him, "Your daughter is seriously ill and will soon pass away." But he thought his immature daughter was just colluding with outsiders for attention. Even though his daughter's fame had spread far and wide, she would still instinctively deny it. She even blamed that immature daughter, saying she was very unfilial for speaking such rebellious words about severing ties with her parents. This caused her mother to cry all day and fall ill. This shows how much suffering Karina endured, growing up in this suffocating family from childhood. But fortunately, there was finally someone sensible in the family this time. After seeing their father's attitude, Karina's older brother finally understood why his always obedient and sensible sister Karina would leave home without any hesitation. He realized then that he had been just like his father before, always ignoring this sister who had silently done so much for him. But sadly, his awakening came a bit too late. He deeply regrets it now, regrets not cherishing her properly before. So this time he chose to rebel. "Father, do you really want to continue like this? What if this anonymous painter is actually Karina? All the characteristics known about the anonymous painter match Karina's. If you keep denying like this, aren't you afraid that one day you'll truly lose her? Are you really going to abandon your own daughter?" For a moment, Karina's father was stunned. After hearing his son's words, he felt a hint of fear in his heart. Yes, it was fear, not guilt, because what he was thinking about now was, if that painter really was his ordinary second daughter, what should he do? What kind of parents would feel fear when their daughter becomes famous? While Karina's father was worried about whether she would take revenge after becoming famous, Karina was already attending the North's most grand evening party, accompanied by Duke Million. Along the way, Karina appeared very nervous. After all, she had never interacted with these northern nobles before, and wasn't particularly familiar with northern etiquette. Duke Million kept reassuring her along the way, saying northern parties weren't as formal as those in the capital. Just act naturally like when hanging out with friends. But when they pushed open the ballroom doors, they were dumbfounded. The usually casual Baron Crane was dressed formally today and made an affected bow saying, "Your Excellency, you've arrived. We've been waiting for you and your fiancée for a long time." Instantly, veins popped on Duke Million's forehead, irritably pressing his high nose bridge, thinking this troublemaker, is he deliberately causing problems? From how he suddenly made everything so formal. Karina must be feeling burdened now. But with Karina present, Duke Million could only suppress his feelings. "Baron Kromber, have you had something happy lately? You're dressed so extravagantly like a peacock in heat." His tone was so gritted with anger. But Baron Kromber seemed completely unaware and continued talking. "Oh, you noticed? I'm happy because of the money performance. Wine is unlimited. I can drink as much as I want. How can I not be happy?" At this moment, Duke Million finally understood. So this guy really came to see him because he postponed the money performance. What a joke. At this time, Viscount Lyle also spoke up. "Duke Million, which foolish brother-in-law suggested holding such a boring money performance banquet? This really is ridiculous. Usually, everyone is known for being shrewd and cunning. Today, why is everyone speaking so inappropriately? If looks could kill, with Duke Million's current glare, these two deliberately causing him trouble would have died hundreds of times already. But because of Karina, to maintain his good guy image in Karina's heart, Duke Million could only endure temporarily and wait to settle this score later. Just as the atmosphere was becoming tense, Karina gently pulled his clothes and expressed that she wanted to greet everyone. But Million said, "You want to greet these guys? But I don't think it's necessary at all." What was the reason that made Duke Million refuse Karina's wish to greet others? The answer was, of course, that damn possessiveness. Because in Duke Million's eyes, having himself was enough for Karina. He could accompany her forever and never get bored. But some people just wouldn't let him have his way. Baron Kromber raised his left hand high. "Hello, beautiful lady. I am Baron Kromber. And I'm Marlin Lyle. Just call me Marlin. Nice to meet you. You're much more polite than some people." Faced with such warm greetings, Karina politely responded to each one and explained that Duke Million had to postpone the performance because of her, hoping everyone wouldn't mind. But before she could finish, Duke Million quickly interrupted. "Don't worry, Karina. The performance is just a simple drinking occasion. It doesn't matter if it's postponed." Baron Kromber and Viscount Marlin were speechless hearing this. "He lies without thinking. I really want to expose him. Well, let's just go along with it. If we dare expose him in front of Miss Karina, he'll definitely seek revenge later." While the two were whispering, Duke Million regretfully looked around. He had originally wanted to show Karina around the banquet hall, but now it was too noisy. Seems impossible. Hearing this, before Karina could respond, Baron Kromber bowed and suggested that since the Duke was busy, he could show Karina around and introduce her to all the northern nobles. Hearing this, Duke Million immediately changed color and fiercely said, "Don't even think about it." But when turning to Karina, he displayed a bright smile. "Karina, don't listen to his nonsense. I'm not busy. Let me introduce you to the northern nobles." But not busy. His subordinates behind him were all making silent signals of denial. Seeing this, Karina looked seriously at Duke Million. "Really not busy? Do you really have time to accompany me? I'm quite foolish. Please don't deceive me." In the end, Duke Million was defeated and admitted he was busy, offering the maximum time he could accept. That would be the next 30 minutes. Karina went to tour the banquet hall under Duke Kromber's guidance. Until the very end, when she left, he was still feeling down. He didn't even try to make her stay until the end. Indeed, Zhang Wuji's mother was right. Beautiful women are the most dangerous. What was the reason that made Karina become the center of attention at the banquet? It turned out that just moments ago, Viscount Kromberg and others witnessed firsthand the art of face-changing. Duke Million, who was speaking harshly to them just a second ago. In the next second, when turning to face Karina, instantly transformed into a bright and cheerful young man. After Duke Milan was rejected by Karina and left looking pitiful, everyone's eyes lit up as they rushed towards Karina. Karina, you're amazing. How did you do it? Milan was like an obedient puppy in front of you. Yes. How did you tame this fierce wolf? This is the first time I've seen him listen to someone like that. Faced with these words, Karina was too embarrassed to respond. Fortunately, a guest interrupted their conversation at this time. Hello, Miss Karina. You must be Lord Milan's fiancée, right? Nice to meet you. I am Count Leonhardt. Karina hurriedly responded and explained, although this matter will be announced soon, I should tell everyone in advance. My engagement with Lord Milan has been cancelled, so please don't joke about this matter. Now it was everyone else's turn to feel awkward. If that's the case, why did his lordship order us to send all the collected items from this subjugation to the palace? Yes, we thought the Duke was collecting them for that horn. Karina listened to their words with some confusion. Duke Milan was indeed collecting for her, but what purpose were they referring to? Fortunately, Marina Lyle, also being a woman, instinctively discovered the issue's connection. Karina, you're not from the north, right? No wonder you don't know. In the north, horns are very precious, so people usually give them to those they cherish, like parents or comrades who fought together. If you give a horn to someone of the opposite sex, it means you consider them as your life partner. Instantly, Karina's face turned red. She recalled her first outing with Duke Milan when they encountered magical beasts. At that time, Milan had personally given her a horn. No wonder the soldiers around them were teasing them. So giving a horn to the opposite sex had such meaning. Then, hadn't she hurt Milan once again? Duke Milan had a question in his heart. It was why Karina always emphasized that she was someone who would soon leave. He felt that the meaning of these words wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. With these questions in mind, Milan returned to the banquet hall, planning to discuss the magical beast subjugation plans in detail with everyone. But everyone's topic kept focusing on Karina. This made Milan very curious. What did Karina say to you all earlier? That makes you fellows so interested in her. What else could it be? Of course, we're talking about how spring has come for our Lord Palace. Seeing Viscount Kronberg's provoking expression, Milan didn't plan to indulge him at all and directly went for a chokehold. If Count Leonhardt hadn't intervened in time to break us up, the talkative Kronbergs will probably meet his great-grandmother tonight. And Count Leonhardt also had some doubts, because he could tell that Karina must be a lady from a wealthy family. However, Karina didn't seem like a young lady who grew up without worries, because he observed that even when Karina was smiling, her brows would unconsciously reveal traces of sadness. And he heard her say she had an incurable disease. Could this be the reason? Duke Milan was surprised. Karina, she even told you about such things. But since she mentioned it herself, I won't hide it from you anymore. The purpose of collecting Heron this time was to treat her illness. But I'm also a bit confused. Clearly, after collecting enough Heron, we should be able to make proper treatment medicine, and her illness could be cured. But now she keeps thinking about leaving. Hearing this, Count Leonhardt had something to say. As someone who's been through it, I must say a scarred person often fears taking steps forward. So, sometimes, you might try approaching them more slowly. I can see that you care deeply about this young lady. But what exactly is this incurable disease? At this, Duke Milan couldn't explain clearly either. He only knew that if Karina's condition continued to develop like this, she would lose part of her body. But what exactly would be lost? Thinking carefully now, neither Carlos nor Dr. Winston had ever explained to him in detail. What would be the worst outcome? While Duke Milan was deep in thought, Kronroth's words actually reminded him. Since we don't know what will be lost, then why not ask someone who has had this disease? The information obtained this way should be the most accurate. Someone who has had this disease. Yes, why didn't I think to ask that person? Duke Milan broke down, because he never thought that the miracle Karina created would come at the cost of her life. So when Karina spoke of leaving soon, she meant leaving this world. Just now. With the reminder from Count Kronberg and others, Milan remembered someone. That was the theater shop owner they met last time, when he went to buy plays with Karina. Wasn't he someone who had art disease and lost his sense of protection? So Milan, despite everyone's opposition, found the theater shop owner late at night to ask about his experience with art disease and the whole process of losing his arm. But after the theater shop owner described his illness from back then, Duke Milan keenly noticed that the symptoms described by the theater shop owner were very different from Karina's symptoms when she fell ill. Because when Karina had an attack, she would often feel like her heart was being tightly gripped. Her whole body felt like it was caught in a huge, spinning millstone. The pain would spread to every inch of her skin, while the theater shop owner only felt spasms and pain in his hand during attacks. However, the theater shop owner calmly said that each artist creates different miracles. Therefore, the symptoms of art disease manifest differently. But when he learned from Duke Millen that Tarina's miracle could create life, he could no longer stay calm, because as far as he knew, for miracles that can create life, there is only one price to pay. That is the Creator's life itself. Hearing this, Millen jumped up from his chair with a bang. What did you say? Life as the price? Why did they never tell me about this? And why did they lie to me? Meanwhile, Karina had fallen into a bad situation. Her consciousness seemed to be controlled by something. She kept repeating, "It's almost time. It's almost complete," creating the miracle. "Millen, I'll have you soon." Karina had gone mad. She wanted to use the power of miracles to create a Millen who would only have eyes for her, even if it would cause her immediate death. She didn't care, because what she wanted now was, like the magical beast Herda she had created before, a Millen who would only see her and stay by her side at all times. And the cause of all this was a conversation from not long ago. It was a peaceful afternoon. At that time, Karina was drawing with Millen accompanying her. Millen casually mentioned then that he wanted a self-portrait of Karina, but Karina expressed at the time that she would rather paint a portrait of Duke Millen. Millen was overjoyed hearing this. To have a portrait painted by the girl he liked, this was undoubtedly something worth being happy about. So today Karina planned to complete Millen's portrait and give it to him as a gift. However, as the brush continued to sketch on the paper, Karina suddenly heard a voice in her ear. That voice kept urging, inducing her to quickly complete this work and use the miracle to create Millen. That way Millen would belong to her alone. She could possess him completely. Thus Karina's consciousness was gradually taken over by this bewitching voice. The speed of her brush kept increasing. Her mouth kept repeating the same words. "Almost there, almost complete," creating the miracle. "Millen, I'll have you soon." Fortunately at this time, Karina's abnormal state was discovered by Duke Carlos, who came to share the auction's grand occasion with her, and immediately stopped Karina from completing the final scene of this painting. But Karina's consciousness, at this point, had been completely taken over by that captivating voice. She struggled frantically, trying to break free from Duke Carlos's restraining hands, wanting to complete this painting that would instantly take her life. Fortunately, in the end, Duke Carlos used Millen's name, successfully awakening the maddened Karina. After Karina calmed down, Duke Carlos asked her about the cause and effect of all this. Looking at the nearly completed portrait, Duke Carlos felt a wave of fear. Fortunately, she stopped Karina in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. However, Duke Carlos still had questions for Karina. "You said your consciousness was taken over by a voice. Did you try to resist it at any point?" But Karina didn't know. She wasn't sure if she couldn't stop, or if she had found reasons not to want to stop. This feeling was just like what she had experienced in her childhood. Hearing this, Duke Carlos's expression changed dramatically, because from these words, he discovered shocking news. "Karina, when you were young, had you already given life to people before?" She traded decades of her lifespan just for 10 minutes of gentle treatment from her parents. Back when Karina was very young, her family went out for a trip because her sister Abriel was mischievous and broke free from Karina's hand. She accidentally scraped her knee. Karina's parents, without asking why, blamed everything on Karina. They accused Karina of letting go of her sister's hand and pointed out that Karina was healthy. But her sister Abriel was different. They said she deliberately let go because of her sister's crying. Said she was so malicious at such a young age. Finally, they gave Karina a hard slap. This was Karina's first time being hit. Although Karina wanted to explain through her tears, her parents wouldn't give her the chance. Back home, Karina cried bitterly. That was the first time she felt being born healthy was a sin. Whenever Karina was sad, she would take out paper and draw to comfort her wounded heart. And it was then that the bewitching voice appeared. That voice kept whispering in Karina's ear, saying one thing. "In this world, there are no parents who love you. So if you want gentle parents, then draw them. Draw parents who only have eyes for you." And so when Karina came to her senses, a pair of parents with gentle smiles had appeared on her paper. And that was Karina's first time giving life to people. Back then, she didn't know giving life to drawn figures would have such huge consequences. Although the parents from the drawing only stayed with her for 10 minutes, those brief 10 minutes gave Karina the courage to keep living. And Duke Carlos, after hearing Karina recount this tragic childhood experience, clenched his fists in anger. Now he finally understood why Karina could complete her works, yet became so seriously ill. At the same time, he couldn't believe there could be such unreasonable parents in this world. Just because their younger daughter was weak, should their healthy second daughter bear everything? If only they had paid a little more attention to Karina, given her even a bit of love, then Karina's condition wouldn't have developed to such an irreversible state. Duke Carlos looked at this girl with a heart full of wounds and couldn't help but feel heartache. He held Karina's hand tightly, softly comforting her, saying that the past was over. Back then, you didn't know giving life to people would have such consequences. It's not your fault. But Karina, you must never create miracles again in the future. And I promise you, no matter what, I will do everything in my power to keep you alive. So you must also have a desire to live on. Looking at Duke Carlos's determined eyes, Karina also strengthened her resolve to live. Don't worry, Carlos, I want to live. This feeling is stronger than ever before. However, just as Duke Carlos was about to breathe a sigh of relief, Mylene, who had learned the truth from the theater owner, and the furious Mylene, just happened to see Duke Carlos holding Karina's arm, kneeling on one knee before her. This made the already angry Mylene even more furious. A battle born from misunderstanding was about to begin. The man returned home to find his best brother, holding his beloved woman's hand, kneeling on one knee. This made the already angry man even more furious. He was already angry about everyone concealing Karina's true condition, now returning home to find his home seemingly stolen. Although this was a misunderstanding, but at this moment, Mylene was on the edge of madness. He was like a fierce wolf about to pounce on its prey, staring intently at Duke Carlos, who was still holding Karina's hand. But due to Karina's presence, Mylene chose to temporarily suppress his anger. However, out of jealousy, he pulled their joined hands apart, declaring his ownership in front of Carlos. He held Karina tightly in his arms. And with this action, Duke Mylene discovered the gift Karina had prepared for him at the risk of her life. A portrait even more handsome than himself. Looking at his portrait, Mylene instantly transformed from a fierce wolf into a husky. This was the first time someone had given him a portrait. He was truly happy, while Duke Carlos, seeing this, awakened and quietly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed the misunderstanding was cleared up, but just as he wanted to quietly withdraw, being the 1,000-watt light bulb that he was caught by Mylene, because at this moment, Mylene had many things he wanted to ask his good brother. And Duke Carlos, seeing Mylene suddenly call out to him, immediately felt a sense of foreboding. Sure enough, after they left Karina's room, Mylene gave Duke Carlos a hard punch. You knew all along that Karina wouldn't live long. Why did you deceive me? But Duke Carlos didn't want to explain too much, because he had promised Karina to keep her condition secret. So he simply said it was a promise he had to keep. And Mylene, hearing this, raised his fist again that had just been lowered. He swung hard at Duke Carlos. Duke Mylene never imagined that his most beloved woman would conspire with his best brother to deceive him. But truth cannot stay hidden forever. When Mylene discovered the truth, he vented all his anger on Carlos. But just as his fist was about to land on Duke Carlos, he thought of Karina. He didn't understand why Karina had to hide her condition from him, why Carlos could know about it, while he only found out now. With a heart full of hurt and confusion, Mylene finally lowered his fist helplessly. But this didn't mean he accepted the matter. He fiercely warned Duke Carlos that no matter what, you must save Karina. But such warnings meant nothing to Duke Carlos, because even without Mylene's warning, he would do everything in his power to save Karina. Moreover, Duke Carlos wasn't someone who would take a loss. Taking a beating quietly wasn't in his nature. So the two began another brutal fight. Afterward, both lay on the ground panting. Mylene took the chance to voice his doubts, asking why Karina had requested him to hide her condition. But Duke Carlos didn't want to get too involved in this matter. He only left saying, perhaps she doesn't want to be abandoned again before death. After Duke Carlos left, Mylene immediately found the butler, asked him to collect everything related to art disease records and materials. He now needed to understand more deeply about the art disease, because only this way could he help Karina. He now understood why Karina, though liking him, would always push him away at crucial moments. Because in this world, nothing is more cruel than letting someone fall in love with a person who has little time left. But now what Mullane feared most was a world without Karina. Karina had been feeling strange lately. She felt Duke Mullane and Duke Carlos were behaving unusually. Because Karina keenly noticed that Duke Mullane was communicating with her less and less. Whenever she talked with Duke Mullane, he seemed distracted. His face would show a strange expression, and Duke Carlos was rarely seen. Karina remembered their last meeting was last time. During that meeting, Carlos's face had a mark. According to him, this was their unique way of communication. Although Karina found it strange, regarding matters between the brothers, she couldn't interfere too much. So Karina focused all her attention on the upcoming monster subjugation mission, because this might be her last chance to help Mullane. Sometimes she wondered when she had started, getting used to life with Mullane. Would she feel reluctant when they eventually parted? At this moment, Dr. Winston spoke up, interrupting her thoughts. Karina, it's time for your medical checkup. Let's go back to your room now. After the examination, Dr. Winston, as usual, asked about Karina's recent physical condition. But when Karina said she was feeling fine, Dr. Winston sighed. Karina, don't try to deceive me. It's not good for treating your condition. Seeing this, Karina could only admit helplessly that her physical condition wasn't good at all. Recently, not only had the frequency of attacks increased, but during each episode, she would have suicidal thoughts. But she couldn't tell anyone, because lately she often felt he let down everyone who had a relationship with him. He felt like he had committed a great sin against Mylian. He felt like he was about to die. As the pain during his attacks grew more intense, this feeling that life was coming to an end also became stronger. Some unfortunate news. Karina's condition had worsened again. Not only did the frequency of her attacks increase, but the pain that accompanied them also became more intense. Karina, who had been tormented by illness for a long time, inevitably developed thoughts of ending her life. So, Karina now often felt she had let everyone down, let down all those who cared about her. Everyone was working hard for her health, yet she was the first one to give up, especially Mylian. If she hadn't arbitrarily barged into his peaceful life, perhaps he wouldn't have so many troubles now. Perhaps choosing to leave quietly now would be the best solution for everyone. Hearing Karina's self-reproaching words, Dr. Winston, sitting across from her, didn't know what to do. Fortunately, the appearance of a maid interrupted Karina's self-reproaching mood. Miss Karina, the Lord would like to invite you to dinner. May I help you get ready? Karina naturally agreed to this. After all, she hadn't seen Mylian for quite some time. Before leaving, Karina asked Dr. Winston to keep their earlier conversation confidential. Soon after, Karina appeared in the dining room in full dress. And Mylian, also dressed formally, was already waiting. As soon as they sat down, Mylian began reporting to Karina about his activities today. And at the end of his report, he didn't forget to compliment her. Karina, you seem to have become even more beautiful in these few days. And this series of heartwarming gestures successfully dissolved all of Karina's resentment from not seeing Duke Mylian these past few days. At this point, I must remind all of you viewers to learn from our Duke Mylian. This is how to find your match and then send me wedding candies. Back to the story. After Duke Mylian's words, the atmosphere between them began to become cheerful. Seeing the moment was right, Mylian asked Karina the question he had wanted to ask these past few days. Karina, don't you have something you want to tell me? I know being honest with people isn't easy, so let me be honest with you first. During the time we haven't seen each other, I often felt lonely. So can you tell me, how has your health been recently? Those who have had terminal illness and been rejected by parents since childhood would understand. When you learn your days are numbered, I believe you would also, like Karina, choose to hide your condition so that you can live your final days, truly like a normal person. But for those who truly care about them, this behavior, it was a huge emotional wound. When Mylian learned about Karina's true condition, he was incredibly sad. He couldn't understand why Karina chose to hide her illness from him. So today, using the excuse of not seeing her for days, he invited Karina to dinner. And at the right moment, he asked this question, Karina, how are you feeling? If you feel unwell at all, please don't hesitate. You must tell me right away. Hearing this, Karina did find it strange. What was wrong with Million? Tonight, he kept intentionally and unintentionally asking about her health. Could he have discovered something? So she tentatively asked, Million, did something happen recently? I feel like you're not very happy. Yes, something very sad did happen recently. Karina, do you know? A while ago, I found a very precious flower. And from the moment I saw that flower, I wanted to have it, so I began to carefully praise it. But now I suddenly heard that flower is gradually withering. So I went to check with a suspicious attitude, only to find out I was the last person to know this news. What should I do? It was truly a very precious flower. It was the first flower that made my heart flutter in my life. But now it's about to wither away. Hearing this, Karina understood everything, but she still chose to pretend not to understand. She slowly stood up and walked towards Milan. This flower isn't the only one. There are flowers elsewhere. You can find another flower you like and take good care of it. No, you don't know how important that flower is to me. There's only one such flower in this world. Nothing can replace it. If that's the case, is there any way to save it? Right, the potion. Maybe the potion I made could work. Then why don't you drink that potion? If it's such a miracle medicine, couldn't it cure your illness? But Karina regretfully expressed that the potion she made had no effect on her. Million felt somewhat lost hearing this. Indeed, Karina's illness couldn't be cured so easily. Now, could they only place their hopes in Halen? Oh right, Karina, I have a gift I've prepared for a long time. This is a necklace made from Halen. I specifically had it compressed during production, made it as delicate and light as possible for convenience, so it took some time. After receiving it, Karina held it tightly to her chest like a treasure. This was Million's gift to her, something that no treasure in the world could replace. Million, thank you. I love it. May I put it on now? Million watched Karina's happy smile. Though the time was getting late, she hadn't expected that just a necklace would make Karina so delighted. Finally, Million took it with a smile and personally helped Karina put it on. It really suits Karina. After speaking, she slowly moved closer to Karina. Promise me, don't leave me alone. Karina, live on. These words have been echoing in her mind these past few days. Especially that passionate kiss. It still keeps appearing in her mind. She shook her head vigorously, forcing herself to calm down. She started packing things needed for going out, because tomorrow she would follow Milan to set out on the monster hunting mission. However, due to her worsening condition, Karina became out of breath after just packing for a while. Although the maids had offered to help, Karina ultimately refused them all, because the maids had already been taking very good care of her as a guest. So now she really didn't want to trouble them anymore. As for Milan, ever since he kissed her that time, he had completely let loose now. He no longer hid his affection for her. Gifts kept flowing like water into Karina's hands, to the point where Karina could no longer tell him not to like her anymore. But the more this happened, the more guilty Karina felt towards Milan. Suddenly, a commotion broke Karina's train of thought. It was the soldiers responsible for feeding the monster Herda. The two of them were trying to figure out how to deal with not keeping proper count of Herda's corpses. But Herda wasn't affected at all, focused entirely on eating huge mouthfuls of food. Seeing this scene, Karina couldn't help but smile. Herda was living quite comfortably. Speaking of this Herda though, Karina suddenly remembered there was something special about her. She seemed able to communicate with other Herda monsters. Karina had originally planned to ask her about this in detail, but ended up forgetting due to her worsening condition. So Karina now decided to go find out. But when Karina turned around, a familiar sense of dizziness took over her body again. Her illness attacked again. At this moment, she hated herself deeply. Why was her body like this? She hated herself, hated being sick. She clutched tightly at the necklace Milan had given her. Started to fear if her condition would keep getting worse, if this pain would accompany her every day from now on. Then one day, she wouldn't be able to hold on anymore, finally bidding farewell to this world completely. But now she didn't want to die anymore. She had begun to love this world. There were people she loved here. One day, Karina saw him running towards her with a worried face. She wanted so badly to tell herself it was nothing, must not tell Milan, or else he would worry again. When the woman opened her eyes, she saw a double-door refrigerator lying in front of her. Good morning. Karina looked at Milan, who was right in front of her, feeling a bit dazed. Hadn't she fainted? Right before she fainted, she had seen a maid running towards her with an anxious face. But why was Milan appearing on her bed? This guy was getting bolder and bolder. However, when Karina remembered that just before waking up, she had been in Milan's arms, nuzzling back and forth like a little kitten, embarrassment took over, making her forget to scold Milan for his improper behavior. Seeing this, Milan thoughtfully poured her a glass of water. Milan said she had sweated a lot in the early morning. She must be thirsty now. Drink this water first to feel better. After drinking the water, Karina said, somewhat guiltily, I fainted again yesterday, though it might not be good for me to say this. But it's okay. Before Karina could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Million. It's fine. Karina, you just want to say that no matter what, you'll come with me to the forest. Seeing her intentions exposed so quickly, Karina didn't know what to say. And Million, seeing her so flustered, couldn't help but feel delighted. Karina, you really can't hide anything. Everything you want to say is written all over your face. But don't worry, I promised you I would take you to the forest. So I'll lead the advance party ahead, first to make sure our camp tonight is safe. As he spoke, Million leaned in mischievously. After confirming it's safe, I'll come back to get you. Karina was once again silenced by Million's actions. Million, stop doing this all the time. But Million acted innocent. If you don't give me some encouragement, I might lose my strength on the journey. What should I do then? See you later, Karina. Be good and wait at home for me to pick you up. Watching Million's departing figure, Karina felt like she was dreaming. What kind of relationship do we have now? Although he confessed, I haven't given him a clear answer yet. But this feeling is really wonderful. Karina's artistic condition seemed to have found hope for healing. Today was the day the subjugation army would set out. Everyone in the mansion was extremely busy. Duke Million had already led the advanced troops early, departing to clear any threats from tonight's campsite. And Karina, who was to accompany the subjugation army, under the arrangement of Guard Grey Deng, abandoned the bumpy carriage and chose the magical beast Helta, which had maximum comfort and safety attributes. And to ensure Karina's safety, Grey Deng had ordered a yellow scarf to be tied on Helta to distinguish it from other magical beasts. Before departure, Grey Deng kept instructing Helta not to move too fast and not to join battles while carrying the young lady. But the magical beast Helta, upon hearing this, just stared at him directly, then chose to completely ignore him. And Karina, sitting on Helta's shoulder, asked the question she had been wanting to ask. Helta, aren't you for my painting? I'm curious. How can you stay alive without consuming my life force? Helta thought for a moment after hearing this, then spoke haltingly with the answer. Because I ate a core that can substitute for the master's life. Hearing this, Karina could hardly believe it. The core Helta mentioned should be referring to Heron. But why could Heron substitute for her life? With this question in mind, Karina embarked on the journey to subjugate magical beasts. Meanwhile, Duke Million had already eliminated all the magical beasts around tonight's campsite. He also ordered people to clean up all the bloodstains from the recent battles with monsters. Although Karina wouldn't mind the bloodstains, he wanted to give Karina the best experience. The only regret was, among the magical beasts they had just hunted, they hadn't found any trace of Heron. This made Million slightly irritated, because he knew Karina didn't have much time left. Her body was now like a cracked hourglass, with life force rapidly draining away. Therefore, he had to hurry, before Karina's body was about to collapse. Collect as much Halen as possible for her. But now he had to return by the original route, to meet up with the girl who made his heart ache. I haven't updated for just a few days. Karina is already pregnant, and living happily with Mylian. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Actually, just when Mylian finished clearing the monsters around the forest and turned back to meet Karina, Karina had already left with the subjugation army. After the team entered the forest, Herta, the magical beast under Karina, suddenly became restless. Karina keenly noticed this. She understood. This was because Herta's nature had been suppressed for too long. Because at the Duke's mansion, Herta wasn't allowed to move freely, only within designated areas. This was to avoid property damage and unnecessary casualties. Now that Herta was back in the forest, it was like a fish returning to the sea, a little boy returning to Hiroshima. The former wanted to swim freely, the latter wanted to destroy at will. But Karina looked at the long line of troops and the heavily loaded carriages. She sighed helplessly. There was no way to speed up the convoy's pace. With no choice, Karina could only ask permission from Grey Din, who was leading the troops, saying she felt tired in the convoy and wanted to go ahead to check the situation ahead. Grey Din, considering that Duke Mylian had already cleared the route of threats. Plus, Karina had the protection of the powerful magical beast Herta, so he agreed to Karina's request. When Herta received Karina's permission to run, it immediately shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. And Karina, sitting on Herta's shoulder, watching the scenery rapidly passing by, finally showed a rare happy smile. This was her first time experiencing such a sense of freedom, and Herta beneath her let out excited roars, echoing through the vast forest. Thus, human and beast sped through the forest, rushing towards tonight's campsite at incredible speed. Soon after, they met Duke Mylian, who was heading back. Mylian was somewhat surprised by this, but didn't find it strange. Karina, didn't I tell you to stay safely with the main force? Looks like you couldn't resist again. Karina explained, because I felt Herta wanted to embrace freedom. Plus, I really like this feeling of riding like on a horse, so we ran a bit faster. But this is really fun. Mylian, looking at Karina's beaming smile, silently took off his outer coat. But no matter how fun it is, you need to take care of yourself. Winter winds are very cold, and if you're interested in horseback riding, I can teach you. Hearing this, Karina laughed happily. Really? I thought you wouldn't agree. Mylian, looking at the happy Karina, couldn't help but smile. Are you that interested in horseback riding? Yes, it's one of the items on my wish list. Wish list? He asked with some confusion. Wish list? What's that? Only hearing Karina speak with reluctant courage. This is a death wish list I made for myself when I decided to run away. After being completely disappointed with my family, being single and terminally ill, he made himself a death wish list. Before death, he wanted to strike back at his family who had ignored him. He wanted everyone in the world to know about his flowers. He wanted to paint many landscapes before dying. And before death, he wanted to travel with his beloved Mylian. Then together with her, try all kinds of cakes, both familiar and unfamiliar. After that, raise a big dragon with Mylian. Finally, marry Mylian and have a child of their own. He would give the child all the love he missed in his childhood, without reservation. But everything after this, Karina couldn't achieve. Now, he couldn't even say, I love you to express his feelings. Terminally ill, he could only be like a wet rat in the sewer, peering through rusty iron grates at happy couples laughing on the street, enviously imagining the happiness that could never happen to him. So when Mylian wanted to know the contents of the wish list, he could only shake his head silently and say these wishes weren't important. These were just listed for temporary comfort, and Mylian, seeing Karina's reluctance to speak more, quietly changed the subject. Look how cold your hands are. It's my fault for not thinking thoroughly. I should have given you gloves before leaving. Karina, feeling the warmth on his palm, couldn't help but pull away slightly. I don't feel my hands are cold, but yours certainly are. But anyway, Mylian, this is my first time in this forest. I feel the air is full of pleasant scents. Hearing this, Mylian showed an affectionate smile and spoke. Karina, your art supplies are still with the convoy we left behind. So if you want to draw, you'll have to be patient for now. Karina was surprised. How did you know I wanted to draw? Was I that obvious? This time, Mylian just gently touched Karina's cheek. Didn't I tell you? Your thoughts are always easily written on your face. Hearing this, Karina felt inexplicably sad. Why was this man before him so sensitive? But the more it was like this, the more Karina had to push him away. Mylian, I can tell you one of the wishes from my wish list. That is, I hope I can see you happy. Mylian was confused. What do you mean by being happy? By happy, I mean I want to see you get married and have children dash. Wait, you mean me with who? In this wish, isn't it you who's supposed to marry and have children with me? Hearing this, Karina sadly turned his head away, not knowing how to answer. And Mylian firmly expressed his thoughts to Karina. Karina, I know you're running away because I can see it. You always pretend not to know my feelings for you. So I want to tell you clearly now, from the moment I fell in love with you, I already made up my mind. In this life, I will never love anyone else but you, let alone marry anyone else. The person I love is you, Karina, not anyone else, Karina. I love you. Karina, I love you. In this lifetime, I will never love anyone else but you. So, I hope you can stay by my side forever. Faced with such intense and direct words, how could Karina not be moved? But she understood that a person who was about to die had no right to happiness. That's why she kept brainwashing herself over and over again. Don't overthink it. Karina, Milane's feelings for you are just out of pity. You must not mistake sympathy for love. Don't let Milane get in too deep. You can't give him lasting companionship. Going on like this will only hurt him. So Karina pushed Milane away once again, lowering her head while speaking words against her heart. Milane, you might have mistaken your feelings for me as love. And from the beginning when I came here, I said I would leave someday. So please don't say anything more about loving me. But when Karina looked up, seeing Milane's expression full of sadness, pain, and reluctance, Karina suddenly understood. He asked anxiously and fearfully, "Do you know everything? How did you find out?" Hearing this, Milane composed himself and said, "I asked that German art disease theater owner. From him, I learned some things about an illness that Carlos and Dr. Winston never told me about. I learned that those with art disease lose the affected part. And Karina, your affected part is the heart. So Karina, you knew all this from the beginning? That's why you came to the north, looking for someone who would take you in but not care about you, to quietly spend your last days and then die somewhere alone." Karina, seeing her thoughts exposed, panicked and stepped back, covering her mouth. She hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to deceive you. I was planning to leave when the time came, but I couldn't bear to. I'm sorry. I was too selfish." Milane, watching Karina gradually break down, pulled her into his embrace with heartache. Gently patting her back, he softly comforted her. "It's all right, Karina. Haven't I told you before? In front of me, you don't need to hold back. You don't need to pretend to be strong. If you want to cry, then cry. Even if you scream out loud, it's okay." But hearing these words, Karina became even more heartbroken. "Why are you so good to me? I have nothing. I can't give you anything. I can't even give you lasting companionship." "It's okay, Karina. You don't need to give me anything. I don't care about promises anymore. I'm serious. I just want you to stay by my side. Please let me stay by your side, so that even if you leave me, I can follow you.